When my daughter-in-law whispered about putting me in a nursing home at my own son's wedding, I felt my world collapse like a sandcastle at high tide. Days later, I was signing away the deed to my beloved beach house with trembling hands but resolute heart. That's when I realized life isn't about the property you own, but the power you refuse to surrender. If you're watching this, subscribe now and comment with the most shocking betrayal you've ever experienced. Trust me, you'll want to follow this story to its bitter end. I should have known something was wrong when Michael proposed to Vanessa after only 6 months. My son had always been methodical, careful, a boy who color-coded his sock drawer and planned vacations a year in advance. But with Vanessa, everything was rushed, impulsive. Love, he called it. Blind infatuation. I feared it was. Mom, when you know, you just know, he told me over brunch, 3 days after he'd purchased the ring. His eyes sparkled with a certainty I couldn't bring myself to challenge. I'm happy if you're happy, sweetheart, I replied, the words feeling like pebbles in my mouth. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. The truth was, I'd never warmed to Vanessa. Something about her calculated laughter and the way her gaze lingered on the artwork in my living room, mentally appraising each piece. She asked too many questions about our family's finances, about the beach house that had been in our family for 3 generations. That property must be worth millions now, she'd commented once, running her finger along the frame of an old photograph, my late husband Richard and I, standing proudly on the wraparound porch, the Atlantic Ocean sparkling behind us. It's not about the money, I'd replied. It's about the memories. Vanessa had smiled, that practiced smile that never quite thawed the ice in her eyes. Of course, Eleanor. Family is everything. The wedding was an extravagant affair, far more lavish than anything Michael would have chosen for himself. 200 guests at the Grand Meridian Hotel, champagne flowing like water, centerpieces that cost more than my first car. I sat in the front row, in a dusty rose mother-of-the-groom dress that Vanessa had helpfully selected for me. It complements the color scheme, she'd explained, though I couldn't help noticing it washed out my complexion and emphasized every line on my face. Meanwhile, her mother glowed in vibrant emerald that set off her blonde highlights perfectly. I endured the ceremony with quiet dignity, dabbing at appropriate moments with my handkerchief. Michael looked so handsome in his tuxedo, so much like his father that for a moment, my heart ached with a double grief, for Richard, gone 5 years now, and for the son I was somehow losing, even as he stood before me. The reception was in full swing, crystal glasses clinking, the band playing something upbeat and modern that grated on my nerves. I needed air, a moment's peace from the relentless celebration of a union I couldn't bring myself to fully embrace. I stepped out onto the hotel's terrace, the summer evening warm against my skin. That's when I heard them. Vanessa and her maid of honor, Jessica, just around the corner, voices slightly slurred from too much champagne. God, I thought that ceremony would never end, Vanessa giggled. Did you see Eleanor's face when we did the sand ceremony? Like she'd swallowed a lemon. Jessica's laugh was sharp, conspiratorial. So, what's the plan now? How long before you guys move into the beach house? Michael thinks his mother should keep it for now. Vanessa's voice dropped to a stage whisper. But I've been working on him. We'll put his mom in a nursing home and take that beach house. I've already looked into some communities for her. One has a vacancy coming up next spring. The glass nearly slipped from my hand. I steadied myself against the balustrade, my heart thundering in my chest. Eleanor's not even that old, Jessica said, a note of uncertainty in her voice. She's 67, Vanessa replied dismissively. And she lives in that big house all alone. It's not safe. We'd be doing her a favor, really. And getting a multi-million-dollar beachfront property in the bargain, Jessica snickered. Exactly. I could hear the smirk in Vanessa's voice. Michael's such a mama's boy. He'll do anything if I frame it as concern for her well-being. By this time next year, we'll be hosting summer parties on that gorgeous deck, and Eleanor will be playing bingo with the other old ladies. I backed away silently, my hands trembling so badly I had to set my champagne down on a nearby table. For a moment, I thought I might be sick, right there in my dusty rose dress that washed out my complexion. Instead, I straightened my spine, took a deep breath, and walked back into the reception. I found Michael, kissed his cheek, and danced with my son as if my heart wasn't shattering inside my chest. I smiled for the photographs, toasted the happy couple, and played my role perfectly. No one, not even Vanessa with her calculating eyes, could have guessed the storm brewing inside me. That night, alone in my house, the main family home where Michael had grown up, not the beach house that had been Richard's pride and joy, I sat in the dark, replaying those venomous words over and over. We'll put his mom in a nursing home and take that beach house. I thought of Richard, how he'd lovingly restored that house, replacing rotted boards on the deck, repainting the shutters every other summer. How we'd walk the beach at sunrise, collecting shells and planning our future. How, in his final days, he'd made me promise to keep it in the family. This is where we were happiest, Ellie, he'd said, his voice weak, but his eyes still bright with love. Make sure it stays in good hands. I'd assumed those hands would be Michael's one day, but not like this. Not with Vanessa's greedy fingers controlling everything. By morning, my grief had crystallized into something harder, colder. I called my lawyer, Bernard, who had handled our family's affairs for 30 years. I need to see you today, Bernard. It's urgent. 3 hours later, I sat in his wood-paneled office, my back straight, my resolve unwavering. You want to sell the beach house? Bernard repeated, his bushy eyebrows shooting up toward his receding hairline. Eleanor, are you certain? Richard always intended. I know what Richard intended. I cut him off, my voice sharper than I'd meant it to be. I softened my tone. Circumstances have changed. I need to liquidate that asset immediately. There's no financial necessity, Bernard said carefully, reviewing my portfolio on his computer screen. Your investments are performing well and with Richard's life insurance. It's not about need, I said. It's about choice. My choice. The house is in my name, is it not? Bernard nodded slowly. Yes, Richard left everything to you. But I thought the understanding was that the beach property would eventually pass to Michael. Plans change, I said simply. Can you handle a private sale? Quickly and discreetly. Bernard studied me for a long moment, concern etched in the lines of his face. We'd known each other since college. He'd been Richard's roommate, the best man at our wedding. He knew me well enough to sense something was very wrong. Eleanor, if you're being pressured in any way. I laughed, a brittle sound that surprised even me. Oh, Bernard. The pressure hasn't even begun yet. I explained what I'd overheard, watching his expression shift from concern to outrage. That's despicable, he finally said, shaking his head. But selling the house, that's quite drastic. Have you spoken to Michael? And say what? That his bride of 24 hours is a conniving gold digger who sees his mother as an inconvenience to be warehoused. I sighed, suddenly feeling every one of my 67 years. He wouldn't believe me. He'd think I was jealous or trying to come between them. So instead, you're selling the property out from under them both, Bernard pointed out gently. Michael loses his inheritance too. The truth of his words stung, but I held firm. Better that than watching that woman take everything, including my dignity. Bernard was quiet for a long moment, then nodded. I have a client who's been looking for exactly this kind of property. European couple, very discreet, willing to pay premium for the right location. No agents, no public listing. How quickly could it happen? Given the circumstances, very. They're motivated buyers. I could have papers ready for you to sign tomorrow. I nodded, a strange calm settling over me. And the proceeds? That's entirely up to you, Eleanor. I thought for a moment, then smiled, the first genuine smile since before the wedding. I have some ideas about that. Very specific ideas. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of activity. Bernard worked his magic, connecting me with the European couple, Hans and Ingrid Schumann from Switzerland, who had been searching for a summer home on the East Coast. They viewed the property that afternoon, made an offer 2 hours later that exceeded even my expectations, and by the following morning, I was signing the final paperwork. I directed Bernard to place the majority of the proceeds, a staggering $4.7 million, into a newly established charitable trust. The Eleanor and Richard Lambert Foundation would provide scholarships for nursing students and fund research into the pancreatic cancer that had taken my husband. A smaller but still substantial sum went into a series of long-term investments that would provide me with comfortable income for the rest of my life. And what about Michael? Bernard asked as I signed the last document. I paused, pen hovering over paper. Despite everything, he was still my son, still the baby I had nursed and the boy I had raised. A modest trust, I decided, to be released to him in 10 years, without Vanessa's knowledge or access. Bernard raised an eyebrow, but made the necessary notes. And where will you live, Eleanor? I smiled. I've always wanted to see the Pacific. I hear Oregon has beautiful coastal towns. It was done. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, the beach house that had been in Richard's family for 3 generations belonged to the Schumanns. I drove home, feeling strangely weightless, as if I'd set down a burden I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. Michael and Vanessa were still on their honeymoon in Bali, a 2-week extravaganza that I now suspected had been Vanessa's idea, keeping Michael conveniently away while she set other plans in motion. I was halfway through packing my first suitcase when my phone rang. Vanessa's name flashed on the screen. My hand hovered over the phone. I could ignore it, of course. But there was a part of me, a part one wasn't entirely proud of, that wanted to hear her reaction. I pressed accept. Eleanor. Her voice was tight, controlled, but with an undercurrent of panic that gave me a small, vindictive thrill. Is everything okay there? Hello, Vanessa, I said calmly. Aren't you supposed to be on your honeymoon? Is something wrong? We got a strange call from our real estate agent, she said, her voice faltering slightly. Something about the beach house being sold? There must be some mistake. I sat down on the edge of my bed, next to the open suitcase. No mistake, Vanessa. The house has been sold. The new owners take possession at the end of the month. There was a long silence, then a muffled sound as if she'd covered the phone with her hand. I heard raised voices in the background, Vanessa's shrill with outrage, Michael's deeper tones confused and questioning. Then she was back, all pretense of pleasantry gone. What did you do? Where's the beach house? Her voice cracked with fury and disbelief. I sold it, I replied simply, to a lovely couple from Switzerland. They're very excited about it. You can't do that, she nearly shrieked. That house was supposed to be. What, Vanessa? Part of your plan to put me in a nursing home. I kept my voice level, even as I felt a surge of righteous anger. Yes, I heard you at the wedding. Every word. Another silence, this one heavier. When she spoke again, her voice was lower, dangerous. You misunderstood. I was just talking. Save it. I cut her off. The house is sold. The money is gone, well, not gone, but certainly not accessible to you. You can't take what isn't yours. Michael will never forgive you for this, she hissed. You've ruined everything. That remains to be seen, I said. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have packing to do. Enjoy the rest of your honeymoon. I hung up before she could respond, my hand trembling slightly, but my resolve firm. I knew what would come next. Michael's hurt and confused calls, Vanessa's escalating fury, the family drama that would inevitably unfold. But for now, in this moment, I had reclaimed my power. I had protected myself from their schemes. The phone rang again almost immediately. Michael this time. I let it go to voicemail, needing time to prepare what I would say to my son. How does a mother explain that she's dismantled a family legacy to protect herself from his wife's machinations? His message was as heartbroken as I'd feared. Mom, what's going on? Vanessa's saying something crazy about you selling the beach house. Call me back, please. I texted him instead. We need to talk in person when you get back. I love you, Michael. Then I turned off my phone and continued packing. I had an appointment with a real estate agent in Cannon Beach, Oregon the following week. A small cottage, nothing grand like the beach house, but with a view of Haystack Rock and a garden where I could plant roses. A fresh start, away from the whispers and schemes, away from watching my son's marriage implode under the weight of Vanessa's greed. Perhaps, in time, Michael would understand. Perhaps he wouldn't. But I had to protect myself, even if it meant redefining what family meant now. I was nearly finished with the first suitcase when the doorbell rang. Puzzled, I wasn't expecting visitors. I made my way downstairs and peered through the peephole. Vanessa's mother, Judith, stood on my porch, her face tight with barely contained rage. I considered not answering, but decided I'd rather face whatever storm was coming head-on. I opened the door. "How could you?" Judith demanded without preamble, pushing past me into the foyer. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "Hello to you too, Judith," I said, closing the door. "I wasn't aware you were back from Bali as well." "I never went," she snapped, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her designer purse. "Someone needed to keep an eye on things here while they were away. Good thing, too, since you've apparently lost your mind." I moved past her into the living room, unwilling to have this confrontation on my doorstep where neighbors might overhear. "I'm perfectly sane, thank you. Would you like some tea?" "I don't want tea, Eleanor. I want an explanation. Vanessa just called me in hysterics. She said you've sold the beach house out from under them." I sat down in Richard's old armchair, gesturing for Judith to take a seat as well. She remained standing, her arms crossed over her chest. "The beach house was mine to sell," I said calmly. "And yes, I sold it." "But why?" "Why now, right after the wedding? They had plans for that property." "I'm sure they did," I replied, unable to keep a hint of steel from my voice. "I heard all about their plans, in fact. Your daughter has quite a loose tongue after a few glasses of champagne." Judith's eyes narrowed. "What are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating a fact. I overheard Vanessa discussing her intention to put me in a nursing home and take the beach house. At my son's wedding reception, no less." For a brief moment, something like shame flickered across Judith's face, quickly replaced by defensive anger. "You must have misunderstood. Vanessa would never." "Please, Judith," I interrupted wearily. "Let's not insult each other's intelligence. We both know exactly what kind of person your daughter is. The only difference is that you see it as ambition, while I see it as predatory." Judith's face flushed crimson. "How dare you? My daughter has made your son happier than he's ever been. Has she? Or has she manipulated a kind, somewhat naive man into giving her the lifestyle she feels entitled to?" I shook my head. "Either way, the beach house is gone. The Eleanor and Richard Lambert Foundation, however, is just getting started." "Foundation?" Judith repeated, momentarily thrown off balance. "Yes," I smiled placidly. "The proceeds from the sale have been placed in a charitable trust. Nursing scholarships, cancer research. Richard would have approved." Judith sank onto the sofa, her expression shifting from outrage to calculation. "So the money's not gone, it's just in this foundation. Who controls it?" "I do, as the primary trustee, along with Bernard Klein, our family attorney." "And after you're no longer able to serve as trustee?" The implication wasn't lost on me. Even now, she was thinking about how to access those funds eventually. "The trust documents are quite specific," I said. "Should I become incapacitated or pass away, control passes to a board of directors, medical professionals, and academic advisors. Not family members." Judith's eyes narrowed to slits. "You've cut Michael out completely? Your own son?" "Michael will receive what Richard and I always intended for him to have: the family home, our investments, personal items of sentimental value. The beach house was a special case." "Vanessa is devastated," Judith said, changing tactics. She had her heart set on raising children there, continuing the family tradition. "Did she?" I asked mildly. "That's not what she told Jessica at the wedding. But regardless, I'm sure she and Michael will create their own traditions in their own home." Judith stood abruptly. "This isn't over, Eleanor. You've made a terrible mistake. Michael will never forgive you for this betrayal." "Perhaps," I acknowledged, the thought sending a shard of pain through my heart. but I'd rather risk my son's forgiveness than my own freedom and dignity. Judith stormed out, slamming the door with enough force to rattle the family photos on the wall. I remained in Richard's chair, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried me through the past 2 days was wearing off, leaving me hollow. Had I done the right thing? Or had I, in my fear and anger, destroyed my relationship with my only child? Time would tell, I supposed. For now, I needed to finish packing. My flight to Oregon was in 2 days. I made my way back upstairs, only to be interrupted by the ping of an incoming text message. With a sigh, I checked my phone. It wasn't from Michael, as I'd expected, but from an unknown number. The message chilled me to the bone. You think you're clever, but you haven't seen what I'll do next. Nobody takes from me, Eleanor. Nobody. I sank onto the bed, staring at the threat glowing on my screen. There was only one person it could be from. Vanessa had declared war. And I had the sinking feeling that selling the beach house was only the opening salvo in what would become a much larger, much uglier battle. My finger hovered over the delete button, but instead, I took a screenshot and saved it to a secure folder. Something told me I would need evidence of every interaction going forward. This wasn't just about protecting myself anymore. This was about exposing Vanessa for who she truly was before she destroyed my son's life along with mine. I resumed packing with renewed purpose. Oregon would have to wait. I couldn't leave Michael alone to face whatever Vanessa was planning next. I had to stay and fight, not just for the beach house that was already gone, but for my son, who didn't yet realize he needed saving. The next morning, I called Bernard again. I need a different kind of help, I told him. Legal protection. And possibly surveillance.
Surveillance.
Bernard sounded alarmed. Eleanor, what's happening? Vanessa has made threats, I explained, forwarding him the text message. I don't feel safe, and I'm worried about what she might do next. There was a long pause as Bernard presumably read the message. This is concerning, he finally said. But legally, it's vague enough that it might not qualify as an explicit threat. Have there been any other communications? Not yet, I admitted. But she's only been back in the country for a few hours. Give her time. All right, Bernard's tone was serious. Here's what we'll do. I'm going to connect you with someone, a private investigator I've worked with before. Former law enforcement, very discreet. She can advise you on home security, document any concerning behavior, and provide protection if needed. A bodyguard? I asked, surprised. Let's call it personal security for now, Bernard suggested. Just until we know what we're dealing with. Later that afternoon, I met Diane Keating at a quiet cafe downtown. In her mid-50s with salt and pepper hair cut in a practical bob and alert eyes that missed nothing, she didn't look like my image of a private investigator. She looked like someone's no-nonsense aunt, which I supposed was an asset in her line of work. Bernard explained the situation, she said after we'd exchanged pleasantries and ordered coffee. May I see the threatening message? I showed her my phone, watching as she studied the text with professional detachment. New number, not in your contacts, she noted. But you believe it's your daughter-in-law? Who else could it be? I asked. She's the only one with motive. Motive, yes. But we need proof if we're going to build any kind of case. Diane handed back my phone. I'll need you to forward that to me, along with any further communications. Don't delete anything, even if it seems insignificant. She spent the next hour outlining a security plan, changing the locks on my house, installing cameras, documenting all interactions with Vanessa and her family. I listened carefully, taking notes and feeling a mixture of relief and dread. Relief that I had professional help, dread at the necessity of it. What about my son? I asked as our meeting wound down. He's supposed to return from his honeymoon next week. I'm afraid of what Vanessa will tell him. Diane considered this. Has he contacted you directly? He left a voicemail asking what was going on. I texted that we needed to talk in person when he got back. Good. Diane nodded approvingly. Keep it brief, documentable, and non-accusatory. When you do meet him, stick to the facts. What you heard, what you did, and why. Don't speculate about Vanessa's motivations or character. That will be difficult, I admitted. I'm sure it will. Diane's expression softened slightly. But if you want any chance of maintaining a relationship with your son, you need to let him come to his own conclusions about his wife. I knew she was right, but the thought of facing Michael, of seeing the hurt and betrayal in his eyes, made my stomach knot with anxiety. How had we come to this? A mother hiring security against her new daughter-in-law, plotting strategy like opposing generals. As I drove home from the cafe, I found myself taking a detour past the beach house. My beach house, at least for a few more weeks until the sale was finalized. It stood as it always had, weathered gray shingles and white trim, the porch swing moving gently in the sea breeze. I parked across the street, just looking at it, remembering Sunday brunches on the deck, bonfires on the beach, Michael learning to swim in the gentle surf. So many memories, now sold to strangers. Had I acted too hastily? Should I have confronted Vanessa directly, given her a chance to explain or deny what I'd overheard? No, I decided. The text message confirmed everything. Vanessa had shown her true colors, and now I had to protect myself, and hopefully, eventually Michael too. I was about to drive away when a sleek black SUV pulled into the beach house's driveway. For a moment, I thought it might be the Schumanns coming to measure for furniture or check the property again. But then the driver's door opened, and Vanessa stepped out. My breath caught. She was supposed to be in Bali. Why was she here, at the beach house alone? I slumped down in my seat, grateful that my car was generic enough, a gray Toyota sedan, to blend in with the others parked along the street. Vanessa didn't look my way as she marched up to the front door, key in hand. Of course she had a key. Michael probably had given her one, unaware of her true intentions for the property. I watched as she unlocked the door and disappeared inside. 10 minutes passed, then 20. What was she doing in there? Looking for valuables? Taking measurements? Planning renovations for a house that was no longer hers to claim? Finally, she emerged, carrying a large shopping bag that bulged with unknown contents. She returned to her SUV, placed the bag in the trunk, then stood for a moment, staring at the house with an expression I couldn't quite read from this distance. Then she took out her phone, snapped several photos of the property, and got back into her vehicle. The SUV reversed out of the driveway and sped off down the street, past my parked car. Vanessa's profile focused straight ahead, oblivious to my presence. My hands trembled as I started my own car. What had she taken?
And why?
The sale agreement included all fixtures and built-in furniture, but personal items were to be removed before the closing date. Had she stolen family heirlooms? Photos? Richard's collection of antique nautical instruments. I pulled out my phone and called Diane. She was just at the beach house, I said without preamble when she answered. Vanessa. She took something, a bag full of something. Are you certain it was her? Diane asked, instantly alert. Positive. I saw her clearly. She used a key to enter, stayed about 20 minutes, then left with a large shopping bag. She put it in her trunk and drove away. Where are you now? Park down the street from the beach house. Stay there, Diane instructed. I'm 15 minutes away. Don't enter the property until I arrive. I agreed, though every instinct screamed at me to go inside, to discover what had been taken. I watched the house, half expecting Vanessa to return, but the property remained quiet. True to her word, Diane arrived quickly, parking behind me and transferring to my passenger seat. Tell me exactly what you saw, she said, taking out a small notebook. I recounted the event in detail, Vanessa's arrival, her time inside, the bag she carried out. I'm worried she took family heirlooms, I concluded. Things that can't be replaced. Diane nodded thoughtfully. We need to document whatever's missing. Do you have an inventory of the house's contents? Not a formal one, I admitted. But I know what should be there. Let's go take a look then, she said, closing her notebook. But first, let me be clear, if we find evidence of theft, we'll document it and report it to the police. This could be valuable leverage in protecting yourself going forward. We approached the house together, my keys sliding into the lock that would soon belong to someone else. The familiar scent of sea air and old wood enveloped me as we stepped inside, and for a moment, grief threatened to overwhelm me. This house had been my refuge, my connection to Richard, and now it was slipping away. Not in the way I'd planned, with Michael taking over and creating new family memories, but to strangers, because of Vanessa's greed. Diane seemed to sense my emotion. "Take a moment," she said gently. "Then we'll go room by room, identifying anything that's missing." I nodded gratefully, gathering myself before leading her through the house. In the living room, Richard's antique ship models remained undisturbed on their shelves. The dining room's china cabinet still held my grandmother's Wedgwood collection. The kitchen appeared untouched. "Maybe she didn't take anything valuable," I said, a small hope rising that perhaps I'd misjudged the situation. "Let's check the bedrooms," Diane suggested. The master bedroom was as I'd left it, bed neatly made with the quilt my mother had sewn for my wedding, Richard's reading glasses still on the nightstand beside a dog-eared mystery novel. His closet remained half full of his clothes. I hadn't been able to bring myself to donate everything after his death. "Nothing seems missing here," I said, relief growing. But when we entered the small room Richard had used as a home office, I immediately noticed a gap on the bookshelf. "The lockbox," I gasped. "It's gone." "What lockbox?" Diane asked sharply. "A metal security box about this big," I indicated with my hands. "Richard kept important documents in it, our marriage certificate, birth certificates, some stock certificates that were passed down from his grandfather." "Was there anything of significant financial value?" I thought hard. "The stock certificates, maybe. They're from an old technology company that got bought out decades ago. Richard's grandfather was an early investor. I don't know what they're worth now, if anything." "What about personal value? Anything that might be used against you?" I froze as realization dawned. Richard's journals. He kept personal journals for years, especially during his illness. They were in that box. Diane's expression grew serious. "And might those journals contain sensitive information? Family secrets, personal confessions?" I don't know," I admitted. "I never read them. They were private, Richard's thoughts during a difficult time. I planned to give them to Michael someday, when he was ready." Diane took out her phone and began taking pictures of the empty space on the shelf, the surrounding room. "This is definitely worth documenting. The theft of personal papers could be significant, especially if she attempts to use information from those journals against you somehow." A chill ran through me. What had Richard written in those private pages? And what would Vanessa do with that information? "We should call the police," I said, my voice shaking slightly. Diane nodded. "We will. But first, let's finish checking the house, make sure nothing else is missing." We continued our inspection, but nothing else seemed to be taken. The lockbox was Vanessa's only target, which somehow made it more concerning, not less. She hadn't been randomly grabbing valuables. She'd come with a specific purpose. As we were about to leave, my phone pinged with a new text message. Another unknown number. "Found some interesting reading material. Your husband had quite a lot to say about you, Eleanor. Wonder what Michael will think when he reads Daddy's true feelings?" I showed the message to Diane, who immediately added it to her documentation. "She's escalating," Diane observed grimly. "Using stolen property to threaten you. This is good for our case, but concerning for your immediate situation." I sank into Richard's old desk chair, suddenly exhausted. What could he have written that she thinks would hurt me? Richard and I had a good marriage. "All marriages have their difficulties," Diane said pragmatically, "especially during illness. People write things in private journals that they would never say aloud. Fears, resentments, dark thoughts. It doesn't mean they're true reflections of the relationship." "So, what do we do now?" "We file a police report about the stolen lockbox. We continue documenting these threatening messages. And," she added with a grim smile, "we prepare for whatever Vanessa thinks she's found in those journals." As we locked up the beach house, possibly for the last time, I couldn't shake the feeling that selling the property had been just the beginning. Vanessa wasn't simply angry about losing the beach house. She was out for revenge. And now, with Richard's private thoughts in her hands, she had a new weapon. What had my husband written during those dark days of his illness? And how would Vanessa twist his words to drive a wedge between me and my son? I stared out at the ocean, watching the waves crash against the shore. Like those waves, Vanessa's attacks would keep coming, relentless and unpredictable. I could only hope I had the strength to withstand the tide. The police officer who took my statement about the stolen lockbox seemed unimpressed by the urgency of the situation. So, your daughter-in-law took some family papers from a house that's in the process of being sold. Officer Reynolds summarized, his pen hovering disinterestedly over his notepad. And you're certain these items weren't given to her by your son? Absolutely certain, I insisted, frustration building. My son is still in Bali on his honeymoon. Vanessa returned early without him, specifically to take these items. Officer Reynolds raised an eyebrow. That's unusual. Newlyweds splitting up during their honeymoon. I don't know the details, I admitted. But I saw her with my own eyes, entering the property and leaving with a bag containing my husband's personal journals and important family documents. And you were, what? Watching the house. His tone had shifted from bored to mildly suspicious. Diane stepped in smoothly. Mrs. Lambert happened to be at the property to collect some personal items before the sale is finalized. She observed Mrs. Michael Lambert entering and leaving with items not included in the sale agreement. I shot Diane a grateful look. The truth, that I'd been essentially spying on the beach house, sounded far worse when stated plainly. I see, Officer Reynolds said, clearly not entirely convinced. And these threatening text messages, you believe they're from your daughter-in-law, but they're from unknown numbers? Who else would they be from? I demanded. Who else would have motive to threaten me immediately after I sold the beach house? Mrs. Lambert, Officer Reynolds sighed, closing his notebook. Family disputes are complicated. What you've described so far, some vague texts and missing papers that may or may not have been taken without permission, doesn't constitute a clear crime. Your daughter-in-law might argue that she had permission from your son to access these items. But she didn't. I protested. That would be for your son to verify, the officer pointed out. I'd suggest waiting until he returns from his honeymoon and sorting this out as a family matter. After he left, I turned to Diane in disbelief. That's it? They won't do anything? I wasn't expecting much more, Diane admitted. Without clear evidence of forced entry or theft of high-value items, police typically view this kind of situation as a civil matter. But, she added, seeing my expression fall, the report is filed. That's important for establishing a pattern if things escalate. When things escalate, I corrected grimly. Not if. Back at home, I try to focus on practical matters, continuing to pack for my now-postponed move to Oregon, sorting through decades of accumulated possessions, deciding what to keep and what to let go. But my mind kept returning to Richard's journals. What secrets did they hold that Vanessa thought she could use against me? Richard and I had been married for 42 years before his death. Like any long marriage, we'd had our difficulties, arguments about money, parenting disagreements, the rough patch after his first affair when Michael was just a toddler. But we'd worked through those issues, built a stronger relationship from the broken pieces. In his final years, as cancer slowly claimed him, we'd been closer than ever. What could he possibly have written that would threaten that legacy? My phone rang, startling me from these thoughts. Michael's name flashed on the screen. I took a deep breath and answered. Hello, sweetheart. Mom. His voice was tight, controlled.
We need to talk. Now.
I'm at the airport. My flight gets in at 4:30. You're coming home early? I asked, surprised. What about Vanessa? She's already here, isn't she? There was an edge to his question that made my stomach clench. At the house. Our house. Michael, what's going on? Is everything okay between you two? A bitter laugh. Nothing is okay, Mom. Nothing. I'll be there by 6. Be ready to explain yourself. He hung up. I stared at the phone, my heart racing. What had Vanessa told him? What had she found in those journals that had sent Michael racing home from his honeymoon? I called Diane immediately. Michael's coming home early. He sounds angry. I think Vanessa's shown him something from the journals. Do you want me there when he arrives? Diane asked. I considered this. Having a witness might be wise, but it could also make the conversation with my son even more tense and uncomfortable. No, I decided. This needs to be between Michael and me, but stay on standby just in case. Of course. And Eleanor? Remember, stick to the facts. Don't let emotion drive the conversation. Easier said than done, I thought as I hung up. This was my son, my only child. The thought of him looking at me with anger, with disappointment, was almost unbearable. I spent the next few hours in a state of anxious preparation, rehearsing what I would say, how I would explain my actions without vilifying the woman he'd chosen to marry. I made coffee, then switched to preparing a light dinner in case he was hungry after his long flight. Anything to keep my hands busy while my mind raced. At precisely 5:47 p.m., a car door slammed in my driveway. I moved to the window, watching as Michael strode up the walkway, his face set in hard lines I barely recognized. He looked exhausted, his normally neat appearance rumpled from the long flight, dark circles under his eyes. I opened the door before he could knock or ring the bell. "Michael," I said softly, stepping aside to let him in. He brushed past me without returning my greeting, dropping his carry-on bag in the foyer and continuing into the living room where he began to pace. "Would you like some coffee? Or dinner? You must be exhausted." "Stop it, Mom." He cut me off harshly. "Just stop with the concerned mother act. I know what you did." I folded my hands to keep them from trembling. "I assume you're referring to the beach house." "The beach house," he repeated, his voice rising. "Dad's beach house. Our family's beach house for 3 generations. The place where you scattered part of Dad's ashes. And you sold it without even talking to me." "I heard Vanessa at your wedding," I said quietly. "I heard her tell Jessica that she was planning to put me in a nursing home and take the beach house." Michael stopped pacing, his face flushing. "That's a lie." "It's not," I maintained steadily. "I was on the terrace. They were around the corner, drinking champagne. I heard every word." "Vanessa would never say something like that. She respects you. She was the one who insisted we have the rehearsal dinner at your favorite restaurant, who made sure your dress matched the wedding colors perfectly." "Surface considerations to hide her true intentions," I said, trying to keep my voice gentle. "Michael, I know this is difficult to hear." "Do you know what's difficult to hear?" he interrupted, pulling a small notebook from his jacket pocket. "Finding out that my father, the man I idolized my entire life, was planning to leave my mother because she was, and I quote, suffocating the life out of him." My blood ran cold. "What?" Michael flipped open the notebook, one of Richard's journals I recognized with a sinking heart. "June 7th, 2015, he read. "Eleanor has become unbearable. Everything must be her way, on her schedule. I can't breathe in my own home. If not for the cancer, I would have left months ago. Sometimes I think she's relieved I'm sick. It gives her complete control over me." The words hit me like physical blows. I sank onto the sofa, my legs suddenly unable to support me. That's not true," I whispered. "That's not how it was." "There's more," Michael continued relentlessly. July 18th, 2015. "The treatments aren't working. The doctor gave me 6 months, maybe less. Eleanor acts devastated, but I've seen her looking at real estate listings when she thinks I'm asleep, planning her new life without me. I should have left years ago, after the incident with Sophia." "Stop," I pleaded, tears filling my eyes. "Michael, please. Those were private thoughts, written when your father was in terrible pain, on heavy medications. They don't reflect reality." "Don't they?" Michael snapped the journal shut. "Vanessa found these. She was looking for our birth certificates to update our insurance policies, and she found Dad's journals instead. She was devastated, Mom, reading how unhappy her father-in-law had been in his marriage. And she decided to share this with you in the middle of your honeymoon?" I asked, a flicker of anger breaking through my shock. "Didn't that strike you as strange?" "As calculated." "What's calculated is selling the beach house out from under us the minute we left for our honeymoon," Michael retorted. "Do you know how humiliated Vanessa was? Having to explain to our real estate agent that the property was suddenly unavailable." "Your real estate agent?" I repeated, the pieces clicking into place. You'd already listed the beach house for sale? While I still owned it. Michael had the grace to look slightly abashed. We were just exploring options, getting a market assessment. Without discussing it with me first, I pointed out. So you and Vanessa were already planning to sell the beach house, a house I legally owned, without my knowledge or consent. That's different, he insisted. We're going to talk to you about it when we got back. We thought maybe you'd want to downsize, move into something more manageable. A nursing home, perhaps? I suggested with bitter clarity. A retirement community, he corrected stiffly, where you'd have people your own age, activities, support. I see, I said quietly. And the proceeds from the beach house sale would go where exactly? Michael flushed again. We'd have set up accounts for you, made sure you were comfortable. While you and Vanessa moved into this house, I guessed. My house. It makes sense, Mom. This place is too big for you alone. We're starting a family. Vanessa's already talking about converting the guest room into a nursery. The audacity was breathtaking. They'd planned it all, selling the beach house, moving me into supportive living, taking over the family home. All without a single conversation with me. Michael, I said carefully, I need you to understand something. I sold the beach house because I overheard Vanessa's plans and felt threatened. But the money isn't gone. It's in a foundation, one that honors your father's memory and supports causes he cared about. A foundation? Michael looked genuinely surprised. What kind of foundation? The Eleanor and Richard Lambert Foundation. It funds nursing scholarships and pancreatic cancer research. The kind of research that might have saved your father if it had existed 5 years ago. Some of the anger seemed to drain from Michael's posture. Dad would have liked that, he admitted reluctantly. Yes, he would have, I agreed. Michael, there's something else you should know. Vanessa took your father's journals and other documents from the beach house without permission. I've filed a police report. A police report? He echoed incredulously. Against my wife? Jesus, mon. Those journals were private, I insisted. And clearly, Vanessa is using them selectively to drive a wedge between us. Or maybe she's just showing me the truth about my parents' marriage, Michael countered. Did you ever think of that? Maybe Dad wasn't as happy as you pretended he was. The accusation stung, but I forced myself to remain calm. Your father and I had 42 years together, Michael. Were they all perfect? Of course not. Did he write some harsh things when he was dying in pain and on heavy medications? Apparently so. But that doesn't erase the love and life we built together. Michael looked away, conflict evident in his expression. Vanessa found something else, he said after a moment. Who is Sophia? I froze. Of all the things Richard might have written about, that name was the last I expected. Where did you hear that name? In Dad's journal. He mentioned the incident with Sophia. Vanessa asked me about it, but I've never heard of any Sophia in your lives. I closed my eyes briefly, memories from decades ago flooding back. Sophia was a research assistant at the university where your father taught. This was a long time ago, when you were very young. Dad had an affair with her, Michael stated flatly. It wasn't a question. Yes, I admitted quietly. It lasted about 6 months. I found out when you were 3 years old. And you never told me? Michael looked stunned. All these years, pretending you had the perfect marriage. We never pretended it was perfect, I corrected. But it was private. The affair was something between your father and me. We worked through it. We rebuilt our trust. It wasn't relevant to your relationship with him. What happened to her? To Sophia? I sighed. She left the university. Moved back to California, I believe. Richard ended the relationship when I confronted him.
He chose our family, Michael.
He chose us. Until he got sick, Michael said bitterly. Then he wished he'd left. No, I shook my head firmly. What he wrote in those journals, those were the thoughts of a man in terrible pain, facing his own mortality. They weren't his true feelings about our marriage. How can you know that? Because I knew your father, I said simply. Better than anyone. Better than you. Better than certainly Vanessa, who never even met him. Richard wasn't perfect. Neither am I. But we loved each other through all of it. Michael ran a hand through his hair, looking suddenly younger and more vulnerable. I don't know what to believe anymore, Mom. Everything's falling apart. The beach house is gone. Vanessa's talking about suing you. Dad's journals make it sound like your whole marriage was a lie. Suing me? I repeated, alarmed. On what grounds? I don't know. Something about elder financial abuse, claiming you're mentally incompetent to make financial decisions. Her father knows some lawyers. I see, I said, a chill settling over me. And do you agree with this assessment? Do you think I'm mentally incompetent? Michael wouldn't meet my eyes. I think you're not acting like yourself. Selling family property, filing police reports against your new daughter-in-law. It's not like you, Mom. Perhaps because I've never before had a daughter-in-law who threatened to put me in a nursing home, I pointed out. She never said that. Michael insisted, his voice rising again. You misheard or misunderstood. Vanessa cares about you. She's worried about you living alone as you get older. Is that why she's threatening to have me declared incompetent? Out of concern. Michael stood abruptly. I shouldn't have come here. This was a mistake. I need to get back to Vanessa. Michael, please. I reached for his hand, but he pulled away. Don't let her turn you against me. Whatever your father wrote in those journals, it was a small part of a much larger story. I need time to think, he said, moving toward the door. I need to process all of this. Of course, I said softly, following him to the foyer. But Michael, please be careful. Vanessa isn't who you think she is. He picked up his bag, his face hardening again. Neither, apparently, are you. The door closed behind him with a quiet click that somehow hurt more than if he'd slammed it. I stood there, arms wrapped around myself, feeling as if the ground had disappeared from beneath my feet. Richard's journals.
Sophia.
The suggestion that I was mentally incompetent. It was too much to process at once. I called Diane, my voice shaking as I recounted the conversation. This is a significant escalation, she said when I'd finished. Using your late husband's private journals to question your mental state, suggesting legal action to have you declared incompetent, these are serious threats. She's trying to get control of the foundation, I realized. If I'm declared incompetent, the trusteeship would be contested. Possibly, Diane agreed. Though you said the trust documents specify that control passes to a board of directors, not family members. Vanessa doesn't know that, I pointed out. She just knows the beach house money is in a foundation that I control. We need to be proactive, Diane decided. Tomorrow, I want you to see your primary care physician for a comprehensive cognitive assessment. We'll document your mental competence before they can challenge it. Then we'll meet with Bernard to ensure the foundation's legal structure is ironclad. And Michael? I asked, my voice catching. How do I protect my son from her manipulation? There was a brief silence. That's more difficult, Diane admitted. He's a grown man who's chosen his wife. The best we can do is ensure that when he eventually sees her true nature, you're in a position to help him. If he ever does, I said softly. You didn't see his face, Diane. He believes her completely. For now, Diane acknowledged. But lies have a way of unraveling, especially when the liar gets greedy. And from what you've told me about Vanessa, greed is definitely her weakness. After hanging up, I wandered through the quiet house, touching familiar objects, photographs, the tangible evidence of the life Richard and I had built together. I paused at our wedding portrait, studying the faces of the young couple we had been, so full of hope and dreams, with no idea of the challenges that lay ahead. Had Richard truly been that unhappy in our marriage? Had he really written those bitter words Vanessa had so conveniently discovered? I thought back to the final months of his illness. Yes, he had been in pain. Yes, the medications had sometimes made him irritable, paranoid, not himself. There had been days when he'd lashed out, said hurtful things. But there had also been moments of profound tenderness, of gratitude for our life together. The night before he died, he'd held my hand and whispered, "Thank you for giving me a beautiful life, Ellie. For staying even when I didn't deserve it." That was the truth of our marriage. Not whatever selective quotes Vanessa had mined from his private thoughts during his darkest hours. My phone pinged with a text message. I tensed, expecting another threat from Vanessa, but it was from Bernard. Eleanor, we need to talk. I've received a concerning email from a law firm representing your daughter-in-law. Call me first thing tomorrow. So it had begun. Vanessa was making good on her threat to take legal action. I should have been frightened, but instead, I felt a strange sense of relief. At least now the battle was in the open. No more whispers, no more schemes behind my back. If Vanessa wanted war, she would have it. But it wouldn't be the easy victory she imagined. I was not the helpless old woman she had mistaken me for. I was Eleanor Lambert, and I had survived far worse than a greedy daughter-in-law with delusions of grandeur. The next morning dawned with a clarity of purpose I hadn't felt since Richard's death. I showered, dressed carefully in a tailored navy suit that projected competence and authority, and prepared for what would likely be a challenging day. My first call was to Bernard, who confirmed my fears. Vanessa's lawyers are alleging that you exhibited signs of cognitive decline and paranoid behavior, culminating in the impulsive sale of valuable family property. They're preparing to petition for a competency hearing. On what evidence? I demanded. Mostly hearsay, Bernard admitted. Statements from Vanessa, her mother, and apparently one of your neighbors who claims you've been acting strangely in recent months. Mrs. Kravitz, I guessed grimly. She's been friends with Judith for years. They play bridge together. Likely, Bernard agreed. But this is preliminary maneuvering. They haven't filed anything yet, just sent what amounts to a threatening letter suggesting we might want to resolve this matter privately. Meaning they want control of the foundation. They're offering to withdraw their concerns about your competence if you voluntarily step down as trustee and appoint Michael and Vanessa in your place. Absolutely not, I said firmly. The foundation stays as is. And I'll see Dr. Phillips today for that cognitive assessment Diane suggested. Good, Bernard approved. Document everything. We'll build our defense while they're still posturing. My appointment with Dr. Phillips was scheduled for 11 a.m. As my physician for the past 15 years, he knew me well, had treated me through Richard's illness and death, had monitored my health with careful attention to both physical and emotional well-being. A competency evaluation? He repeated when I explained the situation. Eleanor, I've seen no indication whatsoever that your cognitive functions are impaired. I know, I said. But I need it documented, officially. My daughter-in-law is complicating things. Dr. Phillips frowned. The new wife? The one Michael just married? I nodded. She's suggesting I'm experiencing cognitive decline, possibly as a way to gain control of some financial assets. His frown deepened. That's deeply concerning. And, unfortunately, not uncommon. I've seen several cases of family members, often new spouses, trying to gain control of an elder's finances through competency challenges. I'm hardly elderly, I pointed out a touch defensively. Dr. Phillips smiled. Of course not. But at 67, you're in the demographic they typically target.
He made some notes in my file.
I'll perform a comprehensive cognitive assessment today, and I'll be thorough. My documentation will make it clear that you're fully competent to manage your own affairs. The assessment took nearly 2 hours. Memory tests, reasoning puzzles, questions about current events, and personal history. By the end, Dr. Phillips was nodding with satisfaction. Perfect scores across the board, he told me. Better than many of my patients half your age. I'll prepare a detailed report and have it sent to both you and Bernard by tomorrow morning. Thank you, I said gratefully. I know this seems excessive, but I need to protect myself. It's not excessive at all, he assured me. In fact, it's smart. Too many people wait until legal proceedings have already begun before getting this kind of documentation. As I was preparing to leave, Dr. Phillips hesitated, then asked, Eleanor, do you feel safe at home? Are there any threats of physical harm I should know about? The question caught me off guard. No, nothing like that. Vanessa's tactics are more subtle. Good, he nodded. But if that changes, please let me know immediately. Elder abuse takes many forms, and financial exploitation often escalates to other types. I'm working with a private investigator, I assured him. And I have a good lawyer. I'm being careful. I'm glad to hear it, he said, walking me to the door. And Eleanor? For what it's worth, I knew Richard well too. He spoke of you with nothing but love and admiration. Whatever your daughter-in-law thinks she knows about your marriage, I can tell you that your husband was a man who counted himself fortunate to have you. His words brought unexpected tears to my eyes.
Thank you, David.
That means a great deal. I left the medical office feeling bolstered, my steps lighter than they had been in days. One hurdle cleared, my competence now officially documented by a respected physician with a long history of treating me. My next stop was a meeting with Bernard and the Foundation's newly appointed board of directors, 3 distinguished professionals I'd selected with Bernard's guidance. Dr. Emily Chun, Chief of Oncology at Memorial Hospital, Professor James Washington, who'd been Richard's closest colleague at the university, and Marian Davenport, a respected financial advisor specializing in charitable trusts. We gathered in Bernard's conference room, reviewing the Foundation's structure, its mission, and the safeguards in place to protect it from exactly the kind of challenge Vanessa was mounting. The trust documents are explicit, Bernard explained to the board. In the event of Eleanor's incapacity or death, control of the Foundation passes to this board collectively, with major decisions requiring a majority vote. There is no provision for family members to assume trusteeship unless appointed by the board itself. And we wouldn't appoint someone without significant experience in either medicine, education, or finance, Dr. Chin noted, reviewing the bylaws. This is a specialized foundation with a clear mission. It's not a family piggy bank. Exactly, I agreed. The beach house money was never intended as an inheritance. Richard and I had made separate provisions for Michael through our other assets and investments. Speaking of which, Bernard interjected, we should review those provisions as well. Given current circumstances, you might want to consider additional protections for Michael's inheritance. I sighed. You mean to prevent Vanessa from accessing it? To ensure it serves the purposes you and Richard intended, Bernard clarified diplomatically. Perhaps a staged distribution, or specific conditions for its use. The thought saddened me, having to protect my son's inheritance from his own wife, but I nodded agreement. Let's discuss options. As the meeting concluded, Professor Washington lingered behind. Eleanor, I don't mean to pry, but this situation with your daughter-in-law, Richard would be appalled. Yes, I said quietly. I believe he would be. I know you said she's using Richard's journals against you somehow, he continued hesitantly. I don't need to know the details, but Richard shared some of his writing with me during his illness, as a way of processing what was happening to him. My heart skipped a beat. He did.
Yes.
He found it therapeutic to write, but sometimes he needed perspective on his darker thoughts. I just want you to know, he paused, choosing his words carefully. Whatever selectively edited passages she might be using, they don't reflect Richard's true feelings about your marriage. The medications, the pain, the fear, they created thoughts that weren't really his. Thank you, James, I said, deeply moved. That means more than you know. Richard loved you profoundly, Eleanor. He told me once that marrying you was the best decision he ever made, even on the days when illness made him lash out at the person he loved most. He squeezed my hand briefly. Don't let anyone rewrite that truth. I drove home with James's words echoing in my mind, a counter to the painful passages Michael had read from the journals. 2 versions of Richard, the bitter, medication-addled patient writing in private moments of despair, and the man who had told his closest friend that marrying me was his best decision. Both were true in their way, but only one represented the sum of our life together. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed an unfamiliar car parked across the street, a sleek silver Mercedes with rental plates. Something about it raised my hackles, a sense of being watched. I texted Diane quickly. Suspicious vehicle outside my house. Silver Mercedes, rental plates. Her response was immediate. Stay in your car. Lock doors. Taking screenshot of Street View camera now. We'll call in 2 minutes. I did as instructed, heart pounding as I watched the Mercedes in my rearview mirror. After what seemed like an eternity, but was probably only 3 minutes, my phone rang. The car is registered to a rental agency at the airport, Diane reported. Rented yesterday to a James Miller. I don't know any James Miller, I said. Probably an alias, Diane suggested. The good news is that our street camera captured the driver's face when he parked. It's a man in his 50s, balding, wearing a dark suit. Not anyone matching Vanessa or her family's description. A private investigator? I guessed. Someone she hired to watch me? Possibly, Diane agreed. Or a process server, waiting to deliver legal documents. Either way, let's not confront him directly. I'm 10 minutes away. Stay in your car, and I'll approach the vehicle when I arrive. True to her word, Diane pulled up beside me shortly after, her nondescript sedan giving no hint of her profession. She gestured for me to stay put, then casually strolled toward the Mercedes, appearing to be a neighbor out for a walk. I watched as she approached the driver's side, said something to the man inside, then showed him what I assumed was her identification. A brief conversation followed, the man looking increasingly uncomfortable. Finally, he started his engine and drove away, Diane watching until he turned the corner. She returned to my car, her expression grim. Private investigator, as we suspected. Hired to observe your activities and document any unusual behavior. I informed him that counterveillance was in progress and his presence had been recorded and reported to local law enforcement as suspicious activity. Will that stop him? For today, she said pragmatically. But they'll likely send someone else, perhaps less obvious. We should assume you're being watched whenever you're in public. The realization sent a chill through me. This is insane. All because I sold my own property rather than let Vanessa take it. It's about power and control, Diane observed as we walked to my front door. You challenged her authority, disrupted her plans. People like Vanessa don't respond well to that. Once inside, I checked my phone to find 3 missed calls from Michael and a text message. We need to talk again. Vanessa's lawyers want to meet with you. It's important. I showed the message to Diane, who frowned. Don't agree to any meeting without Bernard present. In fact, direct all communication through him from now on. Even with my own son? I asked, heart aching at the thought. Especially with your son, Diane said gently. Michael is caught in the middle, Eleanor. Whether he realizes it or not, he's being used as a conduit for Vanessa's legal maneuvering. The safer approach is to maintain boundaries until this is resolved. I nodded reluctantly and texted Michael back. Any legal matters should be directed to Bernard Klein. Love you. His response came seconds later. Why are you making this so difficult? We could resolve this as a family if you'd just listen to reason. Listen to reason, I repeated bitterly to Diane. Meaning surrender control of the foundation, I assume. Most likely, she agreed. Stay firm, Eleanor. You're doing everything right. After Diane left, I tried to distract myself with normal activities, preparing dinner, watching the evening news, calling my sister in Arizona for our weekly chat. But the weight of the situation pressed down on me, making even these simple routines feel forced and hollow. Just as I was preparing for bed, my doorbell rang. I froze, glancing at the clock, 9:47 p.m., far too late for casual visitors. Through the security camera Bernard had installed, I saw Michael standing on my porch, alone but visibly agitated. I hesitated, Diane's warning about maintaining boundaries echoing in my mind. But this was my son, my only child. I couldn't leave him standing there. I opened the door, staying behind the security chain. Michael, it's late. I know, he said, running a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture he'd had since childhood. Can I come in, please? Just to talk. Is Vanessa with you? I asked cautiously. No, he shook his head. She doesn't know I'm here.
Mom, please.
5 minutes. Against my better judgment, I unlatched the chain and let him in. He entered hesitantly, looking around as if the house he'd grown up in had somehow become foreign territory. Would you like some tea? I offered, falling back on politeness to bridge the awkwardness between us. No, thank you, he said stiffly. I can't stay long. Vanessa thinks I'm picking up a prescription. I see, I said, leading him to the living room. "What did you want to talk about?" He sat on the edge of the sofa, hands clasped between his knees. "This has gotten out of control, Mom. The lawyers, the accusations. It's not what I wanted." "Nor I," I agreed softly. "But it seems to be what Vanessa wants." "She's hurt," Michael defended, though with less conviction than before. "She feels like you've rejected her, sold the beach house out of spite. Did you tell her what I overheard at the wedding?" He shifted uncomfortably. "She says you misunderstood. That she was talking about eventually helping you move to a retirement community years from now when you might need assistance. Not a nursing home. Not immediately." "And the beach house? Was I also mistaken about her plans for that?" "She says you took her comments out of context," Michael muttered, not meeting my eyes. "That she was excited about having family gatherings there someday, not taking it from you." "Michael," I said gently, "do you believe that?" He looked up, conflict evident in his expression. "I don't know what to believe anymore. Dad's journals, your accusations, Vanessa's explanations, everything contradicts everything else." "Then look at actions, not words," I suggested. "I sold the beach house and put the money into a foundation honoring your father's memory. Vanessa hired private investigators to watch me and lawyers to declare me incompetent. Which reaction seems more reasonable to you?" "It's not that simple," he protested. "You started this by selling the property without talking to me first. I reacted to a threat," I corrected. "A threat I overheard from your wife's own lips." Michael stood abruptly, pacing the living room just as his father used to do when agitated. "Even if that's true, if you heard exactly what you think you heard, this isn't the way to handle it. Lawyers, private investigators, police reports. It's excessive, Mom." "Excessive," I echoed, incredulous. "Your wife is trying to have me declared mentally incompetent. How is defending myself excessive?" "That's only because you escalated things first," he insisted. "If you had just talked to us about your concerns, would you have believed me over Vanessa?" I interrupted. "Be honest, Michael." He hesitated, and in that pause I had my answer. "I thought so," I said softly. "You're so blinded by her that you can't see what she's doing." "Don't talk about my wife that way," Michael snapped, his face flushing. "You don't know her like I do." "Perhaps not," I conceded. "But I know what I heard. And I know what she's done since. Stealing your father's private journals, using them to manipulate you, hiring people to spy on me. These aren't the actions of someone who has been wrongfully accused, Michael. They're the actions of someone desperate to regain control." "She's trying to protect our future," he countered. "The beach house was supposed to be part of that future. Part of our children's inheritance someday." "And it would have been," I said, "if she hadn't revealed her true intentions at your wedding." We were at an impasse, each of us believing our version of events, neither willing to yield. The silence stretched between us, filled with unspoken accusations and wounded feelings. Finally, Michael sighed. "Vanessa's lawyers want to meet with you and Bernard. They think we can reach an agreement without going to court." "What kind of agreement?" I asked warily, though I already knew the answer. "If you agree to restructure the foundation with Vanessa and me as co-trustees, they'll drop the competency challenge," he said, confirming my suspicions. "It's a reasonable compromise, Mom. You'd still be involved, but we'd share responsibility." And gradually, my involvement would diminish until I had no say at all, I predicted. "That's not a compromise, Michael. That's a staged surrender." "You're being paranoid," he accused. "This is exactly the kind of thinking that has Vanessa concerned about your mental state." The unfairness of the accusation stung. "I've had a comprehensive cognitive assessment," I informed him. "Dr. Phillips found me to be perfectly competent, more so than many patients half my age, according to him." Michael looked surprised. "You've already been evaluated?"
Yes.
"The report will be ready tomorrow." "I'm being proactive in my defense, Michael. Something your wife apparently didn't anticipate." He frowned, absorbing this information. "That complicates things." "It's meant to," I said bluntly. "I won't surrender control of the foundation, Michael. Not to Vanessa, not even to you. The money is doing exactly what your father would have wanted, funding cancer research and supporting nursing education. Dad would have wanted his grandson to have the beach house," Michael argued, his voice rising again. Yes, Vanessa is pregnant. We just found out before the wedding. That's why she came home early from a honeymoon, morning sickness. She was going to tell you herself, before all this happened. The news hit me like a physical blow. A grandchild. The grandchild I'd been hoping for since Michael turned 30. But instead of joy, I felt a hollow ache in my chest. This baby would be born into a family already fractured by suspicion and resentment. Congratulations, I said softly. I'm happy for you, Michael. Truly. Are you? He challenged. Because right now, you're making choices that will affect your grandchild's future. That beach house was meant to be their legacy, too. The foundation is their legacy, I corrected. A contribution to medical research that might save countless lives. That's worth more than property, Michael. It's not your decision to make, he insisted. Not alone. Actually, it was. I reminded him. The beach house was in my name. Richard left it to me, not to both of us. I chose to honor his memory in a way that felt meaningful. Michael's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression tightening. It's Vanessa. She's wondering where I am. You should go, I said, rising from my chair. We're just talking in circles now. He hesitated, then asked in a quieter voice, Do you have any idea how much this is hurting her? The stress isn't good for the baby. The manipulation was so transparent, it would have been laughable if it wasn't so effective. I felt a twinge of guilt despite myself. I'm not the one creating stress, Michael, I said carefully. I've taken steps to protect myself from Vanessa's plans. If she's upset by the consequences of her own actions, that's not my responsibility. God, listen to yourself, he said with disgust. This cold, calculating person, this isn't you, Mom. This isn't the woman who raised me. Perhaps you never really knew me, I suggested quietly. Perhaps I was always stronger than you gave me credit for. He shook his head, already moving toward the door. The lawyers will contact Bernard.
Think about what I said, Mom.
Think about your grandchild. After he left, I sank back into my chair, emotionally drained. A grandchild. Under any other circumstances, it would have been the happiest news. Now it felt like another weapon in Vanessa's arsenal, another way to pressure me into submission. I called Diane, needing to share this new development. She's pregnant, I said when she answered. Michael just told me. They're using the baby as leverage, suggesting I'm depriving my future grandchild of their rightful inheritance. Classic manipulation tactic, Diane observed. Create an emotional pressure point to overcome logical resistance. Did you agree to anything? No, I assured her. But it was difficult. The thought of being estranged from my grandchild. That's exactly the reaction they're counting on, Diane said gently. But remember, Eleanor, if you surrender now, you'll have no leverage at all. Your ability to be part of that child's life will be entirely at Vanessa's discretion. You're right, I acknowledged, though the reality was painful. What's our next move? We continue building our case, Diane said firmly. Dr. Phillips's report will be crucial. I've also been investigating Vanessa's background, her financial history, previous relationships, employment records. There may be patterns we can use. You found something? I asked, sitting up straighter. Possibly, Diane hedged. I need to verify a few details before I share anything concrete. Let's meet tomorrow after you receive the doctor's report. I agreed, but sleep eluded me that night. I kept replaying Michael's visit, wondering if I could have said something differently, something that might have broken through his blind defense of Vanessa. And beneath that, the bittersweet knowledge that I was to be a grandmother, a joy now shadowed by conflict. Morning brought a flurry of activity. Dr. Phillips's report arrived by secure email, a comprehensive 12-page document that left no doubt about my cognitive capabilities. Bernard called to inform me that Vanessa's lawyers had indeed reached out, requesting a mediation session. I've agreed to meet, he told me, but only to hear their proposals. I've made no commitments on your behalf. Thank you, Bernard, I said gratefully. When is the meeting? Tomorrow afternoon. And Eleanor, I think you should be present. It sends a message of confidence and competence that will undermine their narrative. I'll be there, I promised, though the thought of facing Vanessa across a conference table made my stomach clench. My doorbell rang as I was ending the call with Bernard. Through the security camera, I saw Diane on my porch, her expression unusually grim. "I have information," she said when I let her in, declining my offer of coffee. "About Vanessa. It's concerning." We sat in the kitchen, where Diane spread several documents on the table between us. Vanessa Miller, before she became Vanessa Lambert. 29 years old, graduated from State University with a degree in business administration. Worked for 3 different financial firms in 7 years, never staying longer than 2 years at any position. "That's not unusual for young professionals these days," I pointed out. "No," Diane agreed. "But this is." She pushed forward a newspaper clipping dated 4 years earlier. Vanessa was briefly engaged to another man before Michael. Walter Green, 62 years old, widowed, owner of a successful chain of hardware stores. I scanned the article, a small society page announcement of their engagement, featuring a photo of Vanessa looking radiant beside a distinguished older man. "What happened?" I asked. "The engagement ended abruptly 3 months later," Diane explained, presenting another document, a police report. Mr. Green filed this, alleging that Vanessa had transferred funds from his personal account to hers without authorization. He declined to press charges after the money was returned, but he did break off the engagement. "She stole from him?" I asked, stunned. "She claimed it was a misunderstanding," Diane continued, "that he had verbally authorized her to manage his finances. But there's more." She produced another set of papers, medical records. 2 weeks after the engagement ended, Vanessa checked into an emergency room with abdominal pain. She had claimed to be pregnant with Green's child, but medical tests confirmed she was not and had not recently been pregnant. "She faked a pregnancy?" I whispered, the implications sinking in. "It appears so," Diane said carefully, "which raises questions about her current claim." My mind raced. "You think she's lying to Michael about being pregnant now?" "I think it's a possibility we should consider," Diane said. "Especially given the timing, announcing it just when she needs maximum leverage against you." "Michael would be devastated if that's true," I said, my heart aching for my son despite everything. "But how can we know for certain?" "We can't, without medical verification," Diane admitted. "But there's more to her pattern of behavior." She presented another document, a civil court filing. Vanessa was sued by her previous employer for alleged embezzlement. The case was settled out of court, terms confidential, but she was terminated from her position. "And Michael knows none of this," I guessed. "Unlikely," Diane confirmed. "The embezzlement case was sealed as part of the settlement. The broken engagement and false pregnancy claim never made the news. Mr. Green apparently valued his privacy over public vindication." I sat back, trying to process this flood of revelations. So Vanessa has a history of financial manipulation, targeting wealthy men, and using false pregnancy claims for leverage. "It appears so," Diane said. "The question is, how do we use this information? It's sensitive, potentially explosive. If handled incorrectly, it could further alienate Michael. But if she's deceiving him about the pregnancy..." I began, unable to complete the thought. The cruelty of such a lie was almost unimaginable. "We need to proceed carefully," Diane cautioned. "I suggest sharing this information with Bernard first, to include in our legal strategy. As for Michael, that's more delicate." "He wouldn't believe me," I said with certainty. "Not without irrefutable proof." "Which we don't have regarding the current pregnancy," Diane acknowledged. "But we do have documented evidence of her past behavior. That might plant enough doubt to make him cautious." I considered this, weighing the potential consequences. If I confronted Michael with this information and Vanessa was genuinely pregnant, I would appear desperate and cruel, willing to say anything to discredit her. But if she was lying, if this was another manipulation, my silence would allow Michael to become even more entangled in her deceptions. "Let me think about it," I finally said. "We'll share everything with Bernard for now, but I need time to decide how or if to approach Michael." Diane nodded understanding. One more thing, Eleanor. Given what we now know about Vanessa's history, I'm concerned about potential financial exploitation beyond the foundation. Have you checked your personal accounts recently? Credit cards? Investment portfolios? A chill ran through me. No, not in detail. You think she might have accessed them somehow? Michael has likely shared a great deal of personal information with her, Diane pointed out. Family birth dates, pet names, possibly even account numbers or passwords if she asked casually. It would be prudent to verify that everything is secure. I spent the next hour on the phone with my bank and investment firms, changing passwords, setting up additional security measures, and reviewing recent transactions. To my relief, everything appeared normal. No unusual withdrawals or transfers, no new accounts opened in my name. All secure, I reported to Diane when I'd finished. I've also asked for alerts on any transactions over $1,000 going forward. Good, she approved. Now, about tomorrow's meeting with Vanessa's lawyers. We should prepare a strategy. Bernard will handle the legal aspects, but you need to be ready for the emotional manipulation that will certainly be attempted. We spent the afternoon role-playing various scenarios, with Diane taking the part of Vanessa and her legal team, throwing every emotional appeal and veiled threat she could imagine. By evening, I felt mentally exhausted but better prepared. As Diane was leaving, she paused at the door. Eleanor, there's something else you should consider. If Vanessa is willing to go to these lengths for financial gain, what else might she do if she feels cornered? We should discuss additional security measures. You think she might become dangerous? I asked, alarmed. I think anyone capable of sustained deception and manipulation has the potential to escalate when their plans are threatened, Diane said carefully. I'm not suggesting she would resort to physical violence, but we should be prepared for other forms of retaliation, identity theft, property damage, false accusations to authorities. This is insane, I murmured. All because I refused to let her put me in a nursing home and take my beach house. It's about power and control, Diane reminded me. And now that you've challenged her, it's about saving face. People like Vanessa can't accept defeat. It contradicts their self-image as clever manipulators who always get what they want. After Diane left, I found myself wandering through the house, touching familiar objects, family photographs, the tangible evidence of the life Richard and I had built. In our bedroom, I opened his side of the closet, still containing his clothes, his scent faded but not entirely gone from the fabric. I hadn't been able to give these away, these last physical connections to him. I could use your advice right now, Richard, I said softly to the empty room. What would you do? No answer came, of course, but as I stood there, surrounded by the remnants of our shared life, I felt a sense of resolve strengthening within me. Richard had never backed down from a fight when he knew he was right. Neither would I. The next day dawned clear and bright, a beautiful September morning that belied the storm gathering in my life. I dressed carefully for the meeting with Vanessa's lawyers, a tailored charcoal suit that projected authority without ostentation, minimal jewelry, hair neatly styled. The image in the mirror looked composed, confident, a woman in full command of her faculties and her decisions. Bernard picked me up at 10:30, his normally cheerful demeanor replaced by professional seriousness. Ready for this? He asked as I settled into the passenger seat of his Mercedes. As ready as I'll ever be, I replied. Have you reviewed the information Diane gathered about Vanessa's background? He nodded grimly. Quite a history our Ms. Miller has. I've prepared some questions that might rattle her if the opportunity arises. But our primary strategy is simple. We hold firm on the foundation, counter any competency challenges with Dr. Phillips's report, and give no ground on your decision-making authority. And if they bring up the grandchild? I asked, the question that had kept me awake much of the night. We acknowledge your natural interest in your grandchild's well-being while maintaining that the foundation serves their interests too. Funding medical research that benefits future generations is a form of inheritance as well. The meeting was set for 11 o'clock at the offices of Harrington, Walsh, and Peters, the law firm representing Vanessa. As we rode the elevator to the 14th floor, Bernard gave my arm a reassuring squeeze. Remember, Eleanor, you've done nothing wrong. You made a perfectly legal decision about your own property. Everything else is just noise. The conference room was imposing, all dark wood and leather chairs, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Vanessa's legal team was already assembled, 3 attorneys in expensive suits, armed with leather portfolios and tablet computers. Vanessa herself sat among them, dressed conservatively in a cream-colored maternity dress that emphasized her supposedly pregnant condition. Michael sat beside her, looking uncomfortable in a suit I recognized as one I'd bought him for job interviews after college. Mrs. Lambert, Mr. Klein, the lead attorney, a silver-haired man with cold eyes, greeted us with practiced cordiality. "Thank you for joining us. I'm Thomas Harrington. These are my associates, Jennifer Walsh and Robert Peters." Introductions completed, we took our seats across the table from them, a physical manifestation of the battle lines drawn between us. I nodded politely to Michael, who returned the gesture stiffly. Vanessa didn't meet my eyes, focusing intently on arranging papers before her. "Let me begin by saying that we all want to resolve this matter amicably," Harrington started, his tone smooth as polished marble. "Family disputes are always painful, and protracted legal battles serve no one's interests." "We're in complete agreement on that point," Bernard responded pleasantly. "So perhaps you could clarify exactly what matter we're attempting to resolve?" "As far as we're aware, Mrs. Lambert has simply exercised her legal right to sell property that was solely in her name and establish a charitable foundation with the proceeds." Harrington's smile tightened slightly. "The matter, Mr. Klein, is the concerning pattern of behavior exhibited by Mrs. Lambert in recent months, behavior that has raised legitimate questions about her capacity to make sound financial decisions." "Ah," Bernard nodded, feigning understanding. "You're referring to the competency challenge you've been threatening. I assume you have substantial evidence to support such a serious allegation." "We have several witnesses prepared to testify to Mrs. Lambert's erratic behavior," Harrington replied, "including family members who have observed a marked change in her decision-making and emotional stability." "Fascinating," Bernard commented, opening his briefcase. "We, on the other hand, have this." He placed Dr. Phillips's report on the table. "A comprehensive cognitive assessment conducted by Dr. David Phillips, Mrs. Lambert's physician of 15 years, confirming her complete mental competence. I've brought copies for everyone." He distributed the document to each person at the table. I watched Vanessa's face as she quickly scanned the first page, her expression flickering between surprise and annoyance before settling back into a neutral mask. "A single evaluation doesn't negate months of concerning behavior," Jennifer Walsh interjected smoothly, "particularly when the patient may have been having a good day during testing." Dr. Phillips addresses that specifically on page 8, Bernard pointed out. He notes that Mrs. Lambert's performance was consistent with her cognitive baseline established through regular checkups over the past 15 years. There is no evidence whatsoever of decline or impairment. "With all due respect," Harrington countered, "we would want our own expert to perform an independent evaluation." "Mrs. Lambert would be happy to undergo additional testing," Bernard agreed readily. "Though I should mention that any petition for a court-ordered evaluation would now be countered with this existing professional assessment, substantially weakening your position from the outset." The attorneys exchanged glances, clearly recalibrating their approach. It was Michael who broke the tense silence. "Mom," he said, leaning forward, "this isn't about tests or evaluations. This is about family, about doing what's right for all of us, including your grandchild." He placed his hand over Vanessa's, a united front. "I agree that family is important, Michael," I replied calmly, "which is why I've structured my financial affairs to benefit not just you, but future generations through medical research that might save lives." The beach house was meant to be part of our children's inheritance. Vanessa spoke for the first time, her voice trembling slightly, a performance I now recognized with newly informed eyes. A place where they could spend summers, build memories, just like Michael did growing up. "The foundation will benefit your children far more than a single property could," I countered. "Advances in medical research, educational opportunities for deserving students, these are legacies that last beyond bricks and mortar." "That wasn't your decision to make alone," Vanessa insisted, a flash of real anger breaking through her composed facade. Actually, it was, Bernard interjected. The property was solely in Mrs. Lambert's name, left to her unconditionally by her late husband. She had full legal authority to dispose of it as she saw fit. Which brings us to our proposal, Harrington said, steering the conversation back to his agenda. A compromise that respects Mrs. Lambert's wishes while acknowledging the legitimate interests of her family. He slid a document across the table, a proposed restructuring of the foundation that would add Michael and Vanessa as co-trustees, with equal voting rights on all decisions regarding foundation assets and disbursements. This arrangement would ensure that the foundation continues its charitable mission, Harrington explained, while giving the entire family a voice in its management. Bernard reviewed the document briefly, then passed it to me. I scanned the provisions, noting that it included a clause allowing for the foundation to be dissolved by majority vote of the trustees, with assets distributed as determined by the board. A clever trap, I commented, sliding the document back. With 3 trustees and a majority rule, Michael and Vanessa could simply vote to dissolve the foundation entirely and reclaim the assets whenever they wished. That's not our intention, Michael protested, though his eyes betrayed uncertainty. Had he even read the proposal before this meeting? Intention or not, it's what this document allows, Bernard pointed out, which makes it less a compromise and more an elaborate mechanism for undoing Mrs. Lambert's decisions entirely. We're open to adjustments in the language, Walsh offered smoothly. Perhaps a provision requiring unanimity for dissolution? The foundation structure remains as established, I said firmly. I am the primary trustee. Upon my death or incapacity, control passes to the board of directors already appointed, professionals in medicine, education, and finance who understand the foundation's mission. That completely cuts out your own family, Vanessa said, her voice rising with indignation. Your own grandchild. My grandchild is provided for through separate inheritances, I replied, keeping my voice level. As is Michael. The beach house funds were always intended for charitable purposes, a decision Richard and I discussed many times during his illness. It was a slight exaggeration. Richard and I had discussed charitable giving, but not specifically dedicating the beach house proceeds to it. Still, I knew in my heart he would have approved of my decision, especially given the circumstances that prompted it. Perhaps we need to take a short break, Harrington suggested, clearly sensing the escalating tension. Give everyone a chance to consider positions and alternatives. We agreed, and the attorneys stepped out, leaving me alone with Bernard while Michael and Vanessa huddled at the far end of the conference room, speaking in urgent whispers. They're in a weaker position than they expected, Bernard observed quietly. The competency challenge was their primary leverage, and Dr. Phillips's report has effectively neutralized it. So, what's their next move? I asked. Probably emotional appeals, focused on the grandchild, he predicted, possibly followed by threats of public exposure, suggesting they'll make this dispute public in ways that might embarrass you. Should we mention what Diane discovered about Vanessa's past? I whispered. Bernard considered this. Not yet. It's a nuclear option. Once deployed, there's no going back. Let's see what they offer next. When the attorneys returned, their demeanor had shifted subtly. Less aggressive, more conciliatory. Harrington presented a revised proposal. We understand your desire to maintain the foundation's integrity, he began. So, instead of restructuring the foundation itself, we propose a partial reallocation of assets. 25% of the current foundation funds would be transferred to a trust for your grandchild's education and well-being, with Michael and Vanessa as trustees. The foundation funds have already been allocated to specific programs and research grants, Bernard replied. Extracting 25% would require canceling commitments already made to hospitals and universities. Surely some adjustment is possible, Harrington pressed. For the sake of family harmony. I leaned forward, meeting Vanessa's eyes directly for the first time in the meeting. Let me be clear. The foundation remains intact, as established. Michael and my grandchild will inherit substantial assets outside the foundation, as Richard and I always intended. This is not negotiable. Vanessa's composure slipped, a flash of genuine fury crossing her features before she controlled herself. "This is about punishing me, isn't it? You heard something at the wedding, something you clearly misinterpreted, and now you're using the foundation to make sure I can't benefit from family assets." "This isn't about punishment," I corrected. "It's about protection of Richard's legacy, of charitable commitments, and yes, of my own autonomy." "Your autonomy?" Vanessa repeated incredulously. "What about our family's future? What about the plans we had for that property?" "Plans you made without consulting me, the legal owner," I pointed out. "Plans that included, as I clearly heard you say, putting me in a nursing home." "I never said that," Vanessa insisted, her voice rising sharply. "You're twisting my words to justify what you did." "Mrs. Lambert," Harrington interjected, his tone warning, "these accusations aren't productive." "Neither is pretending we're here to negotiate in good faith," I replied calmly. "You've threatened a baseless competency challenge, tried to manipulate me through my grandchild, and now propose dismantling the foundation I established. There's nothing to negotiate. The foundation stands as created." Michael stood abruptly. "This is pointless. Mom's made up her mind. She doesn't care about what we want, about our child's future." "Michael," I began, but he cut me off with a sharp gesture. "Save it, Mom. You've made your priorities clear. The foundation matters more to you than your own family." He took Vanessa's arm, helping her to her feet with exaggerated solicitude. "We're done here," he announced to the attorneys. "File whatever you need to file. I won't stand by and watch my child's inheritance given away to strangers." They left, Vanessa casting a venomous glance over her shoulder as they exited. The attorneys looked momentarily flustered by their client's abrupt departure, but quickly regained their professional composure. "It seems we've reached an impasse," Harrington observed unnecessarily. "We'll need to confer with our clients about next steps." "Of course," Bernard agreed pleasantly. "Though I should mention that Mrs. Lambert is prepared to vigorously defend any legal challenge to her competence or to the foundation structure. Given the documentation we've provided today, I believe your clients would be ill-advised to pursue this matter further." "We'll take that under consideration," Harrington replied stiffly. As Bernard and I gathered our materials to leave, I felt a curious mixture of triumph and heartbreak. I had held my ground, maintained control of the foundation, and clearly caught Vanessa and her legal team off guard with Dr. Phillips's evaluation. But the cost was Michael's anger, his belief that I had chosen charitable work over family loyalty. In the elevator descending to the lobby, Bernard squeezed my shoulder supportively. "You did well in there, Eleanor. Held firm without losing your composure." "Michael hates me," I said quietly. "He's upset," Bernard corrected. "There's a difference. And once he has time to reflect, and perhaps once he learns more about Vanessa's history, he may see things differently. If he ever gives me the chance to tell him," I sighed. "He seemed pretty definitive about being done with me." "People say things in anger they don't mean," Bernard reminded me. "Give him time." As we exited the building, a flicker of movement caught my eye, a familiar figure hurrying away along the sidewalk, head down, clearly trying to avoid being seen. "Bernard," I murmured, gripping his arm. "That woman, the one in the blue coat. Isn't that Sophia?" Bernard followed my gaze, squinting slightly. "Sophia, your husband's former research assistant? The one he had the affair with?" "Yes," I confirmed, watching as she disappeared around a corner. "What would she be doing here, at the offices of Vanessa's attorneys?" Bernard's expression darkened. "I don't like the coincidence. Let me make a call." While he stepped aside to speak quietly into his phone, I tried to process this newest development. Sophia, the woman who had nearly destroyed my marriage 30 years ago, suddenly reappearing at the very law firm representing Vanessa. It couldn't be random chance. My contact at Harrington's firm confirms that they had a meeting scheduled with the Sophia Reeves right after ours, Bernard reported when he rejoined me. "She's apparently a potential witness in a case they're preparing." "Our case?" I guessed grimly. "They've found her and convinced her to testify about Richard's affair, to support whatever narrative they're building about our marriage." "Most likely," Bernard agreed. though it's difficult to see how a 30-year-old affair would be relevant to your current competence. It's not about legal relevance, I realized. It's about Michael. About undermining his image of his father, of our marriage. Vanessa is trying to isolate him completely from his family history, from me, from any source of support or perspective outside her influence. A classic manipulation tactic, Bernard nodded grimly. And potentially effective, especially if this Sophia is willing to embellish or distort the past. We need to talk to her, I decided, before she provides a formal statement to Vanessa's lawyers. That's ethically complicated, Bernard cautioned. Approaching an opposing witness could be seen as interference. Then you can't be involved, I conceded. But I can. As a private citizen with a prior relationship to Sophia, I have every right to speak with her. Eleanor, Bernard's tone was warning. This is dangerous territory. Anything you say to her could be used against you. I understand the risk, I assured him. But I can't stand by while Vanessa weaponizes my past to manipulate my son. Diane can help me locate Sophia. Approach her carefully. Bernard still looked concerned, but nodded reluctantly. Just be extremely cautious. Record any conversation, have a witness present if possible, and say nothing that could be construed as trying to influence her testimony. I'll be careful, I promised. But I need to know what Vanessa has told her, what she's being asked to say. As Bernard drove me home, I called Diane, explaining the situation and my need to locate Sophia quickly. I'll find her, Diane assured me. But Eleanor, Bernard is right about the risks. Approaching her directly could backfire spectacularly. I'll take the chance, I said firmly. 30 years ago, I confronted Sophia about her affair with Richard, and it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. But it was necessary then to save my marriage. Now it's necessary to save my relationship with my son. All right, Diane conceded. Give me a few hours to track her down and assess the situation. Don't do anything until we talk again. I agreed, though impatience burned within me. Every hour that passed was an hour Vanessa could use to further poison Michael's mind, to cement her narrative about me, about Richard, about our family history. Back at home, I tried to distract myself with normal activities, answering emails, paying bills, preparing a light lunch. But my thoughts kept returning to the sight of Sophia hurrying away from the law offices, to the realization that Vanessa was now dredging up the most painful chapter of my marriage to use against me. How had she even known about Sophia? The affair had been kept quiet, known only to a few close friends and colleagues. Had she found references to it in Richard's journals? Or had she somehow investigated our past, searching for vulnerabilities to exploit? My phone rang, startling me from these thoughts. Unknown number. My first instinct was to ignore it, another of Vanessa's burner phones, perhaps with more threats or manipulations. But something made me answer. Mrs. Lambert? A woman's voice, hesitant, vaguely familiar despite the passage of decades. It's Sophia. Sophia Reeves. We need to talk. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Sophia Reeves, the woman who had nearly destroyed my marriage, whom I hadn't seen or spoken to in almost 30 years, was calling me. Mrs. Lambert? Are you there? Her voice held a note of urgency. Yes, I finally managed. I'm here. How did you get this number? It doesn't matter, she said quickly. What matters is that we need to talk. In person. Today, if possible. My mind raced with questions and suspicions.
Why?
I just saw you leaving Harrington's law offices. Are you working with my daughter-in-law now? A bitter laugh. Not exactly. Look, I can't explain over the phone. Can we meet somewhere public? In an hour? Despite my wariness, curiosity won out. There's a cafe called Meridian on Oakwood Avenue. Do you know it? I'll find it, she promised. 1 hour. And Mrs. Lambert, Eleanor, come alone. Please. The line went dead before I could respond. I immediately called Diane, explaining the unexpected contact. It could be a trap, Diane warned. Vanessa's setting you up for some kind of confrontation that they can use against you. Possibly, I acknowledged. But Sophia sounded genuinely urgent, almost frightened. I need to hear what she has to say. Then I'll be there too, Diane insisted. Not with you. I'll sit separately, close enough to intervene if necessary, but not so close that she'll know you're being watched. Thank you, I said, relieved. I'll text you when I'm on my way. An hour later, I sat at a corner table in Meridian Cafe, a small independent coffee shop I'd chosen for its quiet atmosphere and limited clientele. Diane had arrived 15 minutes earlier, positioning herself at the counter with a clear view of my table but far enough away that a casual observer wouldn't connect us. I recognized Sophia the moment she entered, though 30 years had transformed the young research assistant into a woman in her early 60s, her once auburn hair now steel gray, her slender figure slightly thickened with age. She spotted me immediately and made her way to my table, her movements betraying nervous energy. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, slipping into the chair opposite mine. Up close, I could see the fine lines around her eyes, the tension in her posture. "You said it was urgent," I replied neutrally. "I'm listening." Sophia glanced around, as if checking for eavesdroppers, then leaned forward. "Your daughter-in-law contacted me 3 days ago. She said she was researching a family history, that she'd found my name in Richard's papers and wanted to talk about his time at the university." "And you agreed to meet with her?" I asked, keeping my tone even. "I was curious," Sophia admitted. "It's been 30 years since everything happened. I thought perhaps it was time to make peace with the past." She sighed. I was naive. It became clear very quickly that she wasn't interested in academic history. She wanted dirt, specifically details about my affair with Richard. "Which you provided," I guessed, unable to keep a hint of bitterness from my voice. "No," Sophia shook her head emphatically. I shut the conversation down as soon as I realized what she was after. I told her that period of my life was private and not open for discussion. She met my eyes directly. "I've regretted the pain I caused you, Eleanor. I was young and selfish, but I'm not that person anymore. I wouldn't participate in hurting you again." I studied her face, searching for signs of deception, but finding only what appeared to be genuine remorse. "Then why were you at her lawyer's office today?" "Because she wouldn't take no for an answer," Sophia explained, frustration evident in her voice. "After I refused to discuss the affair, she started making threats, said she had evidence I'd engaged in academic fraud during my time at the university, that she would expose me if I didn't cooperate." "Academic fraud?" I repeated, surprised. "Was there any truth to that?" "None whatsoever," Sophia said firmly. "I've had a respected career in research for 30 years. But mud sticks, especially in academia. Even a false accusation could damage my reputation, cost me my current position." "So you agreed to meet with her lawyers," I concluded. "Yes, but not to give them what they wanted," Sophia clarified. "I want to make it clear on record that I would not provide false testimony about Richard or your marriage, regardless of her threats." She paused, then added quietly, "I also recorded our earlier conversation when she made those threats. I thought you should have a copy." She placed a small USB drive on the table between us. "It's all here. Our meeting 3 days ago, her call yesterday with specific threats if I didn't cooperate, and a copy of the statement I gave her lawyers today, refusing to participate in her scheme." I stared at the tiny device, hardly daring to believe it could be so simple. "Why are you doing this? Why help me after all this time?" Sophia's expression softened. "Because I owe you a debt I can never repay. When you confronted me about the affair, you had every right to destroy me, professionally, personally. You could have made sure I never worked in academia again. Instead, you showed a dignity and restraint that I've never forgotten." "I was thinking of my son," I said softly, "of sparing him the public scandal." "I know," Sophia nodded. "And now your son is married to a woman who makes me look like an amateur when it comes to manipulation. I couldn't stand by and let her use my past mistakes as a weapon against you." I picked up the USB drive, turning it over in my fingers. "This could be exactly what we need to open Michael's eyes to what Vanessa is really doing." "There's something else you should know," Sophia added, her voice lowering. "When I refused to cooperate, Vanessa became unhinged. The threats escalated from professional damage to personal. She said she knew where I lived, that accidents happen to people who don't play along. A chill ran through me. She threatened your physical safety? Not explicitly, Sophia clarified. But the implication was clear. That's why I came to you directly. I've already filed a police report about the threats, but I thought you should be warned as well. This woman is dangerous, Eleanor. More dangerous than I think even you realize. I'm beginning to understand that, I said grimly. Thank you for the warning and for this. I held up the USB drive. It might make all the difference. Sophia stood to leave, then hesitated. There's one more thing. Something I've wanted to tell you for 30 years, but never had the courage. She took a deep breath. Richard loved you completely. What happened between us, it was a mistake he regretted instantly and profoundly. He told me that the day you confronted us, after you left. Did he? I asked, an old pain stirring despite the decades that had passed. Yes, she confirmed. His exact words were, I've just wounded the best person I've ever known, for absolutely nothing of value. I've never forgotten that, Eleanor. Whatever Richard wrote in those journals during his illness, whatever Vanessa is trying to use against you, please know that the man I knew, even at his worst moment, recognized how precious you were. With that, she walked away, leaving me sitting with the USB drive and her unexpected absolution. Across the cafe, I caught Diane's eye and nodded slightly, indicating that all was well. She paid her bill and slipped out, texting me that she would meet me back at my house. I remained a few minutes longer, collecting my thoughts. Sophia's words about Richard had touched something deep within me, a wound I thought had healed decades ago but apparently still carried traces of pain. More importantly, her warning about Vanessa had confirmed my worst fears. If she was willing to threaten a university professor over a 30-year-old affair, what might she do to me? The more direct obstacle to her ambitions? Back at home, Diane and I reviewed the contents of the USB drive. The recordings were clear and damning, Vanessa smoothly transitioning from friendly curiosity to unveiled threats when Sophia refused to cooperate, explicitly stating her intention to build a case against me using whatever means necessary. This is exactly what we needed, Diane said, satisfaction evident in her voice. Concrete evidence of Vanessa's manipulation and willingness to coerce false testimony. Bernard can use this to completely discredit any legal challenge she brings. But will it convince Michael? I wondered. That's what matters most to me. It should, Diane said confidently. Hearing Vanessa's voice, her explicit threats, it's hard to explain that away as a misunderstanding. I called Bernard immediately, explaining what had happened and arranging to send him the digital files securely. This changes everything, he agreed after reviewing them. Attempting to coerce false testimony is not only unethical, but potentially criminal. Harrington's firm will want nothing to do with this case once they see these recordings. What about the threats against Sophia? I asked. Should we be concerned about similar threats against me? It's certainly concerning, Bernard acknowledged. But actually helpful from a legal perspective, it demonstrates a pattern of intimidation that strengthens our position enormously. I'd suggest continuing the security measures Diane has implemented, but otherwise, we're in a much stronger position now. The next question was how to approach Michael with this new evidence. A direct confrontation might cause him to become defensive, rejecting the recordings as somehow manipulated or taken out of context. But allowing Vanessa's lies to continue unchallenged was equally unacceptable. I think we need a neutral third party, Diane suggested. Someone Michael trusts, who can present the evidence without the emotional baggage of your direct involvement. James, I said immediately. Professor Washington. He was Richard's closest friend, Michael's godfather. If anyone can reach Michael, it's him. James agreed readily when I called him, his concern for Michael evident. I've been worried about him since you told me about the situation, he admitted. Richard would be heartbroken to see his son manipulated this way. Will you talk to him? I asked. Show him the recordings? Of course, James promised. I'll call him right now, invite him for dinner tonight. Just him. I'll suggest it's about some of Richard's old research materials I've been organizing. While waiting to hear back from James, I found myself drawn once again to Richard's study, the room we'd preserved almost exactly as he'd left it 5 years earlier. His books lined the shelves, his favorite fountain pen still rested in its holder on the desk, his reading glasses folded neatly beside a stack of academic journals he'd never finished reviewing. I sat in his chair, running my fingers over the worn leather armrests, trying to reconcile the man I'd loved for 42 years with the bitter words Michael had read from the journals. Had Richard truly felt trapped in our marriage during his final months? Had the pain and medication truly distorted his perceptions so drastically? Or was there another explanation? A thought struck me suddenly, a memory from the early days of Richard's illness. He'd been working on a novel, a project he'd started during a sabbatical year and continued in his spare time. A work of fiction about a professor whose life unravels during a terminal illness. With growing excitement, I began searching the bookshelves, looking for the manuscript he'd shown me parts of. It had been handwritten in journals similar to the ones he kept for his personal thoughts, leather-bound notebooks with no labels to distinguish their contents. After nearly an hour of searching, I found them. 3 journals shelved among his academic books, unmarked except for small numbers on the spines. 1, 2, 3. With trembling hands, I opened the first volume and began to read. June 7th, 2015. Eleanor has become unbearable. Everything must be her way, on her schedule. I can't breathe in my own home. If not for the cancer, I would have left months ago. Sometimes I think she's relieved I'm sick. It gives her complete control over me. My heart sank. These were exactly the words Michael had read to me, the painful accusations that had seemed so unlike the Richard the first knew. But as I continued reading, the context became clear. These weren't Richard's personal journals at all, but his novel, written in first person from the perspective of his fictional protagonist, a bitter, self-pitying man nothing like Richard himself. I flipped forward, finding the passage about Sophia. July 18th, 2015. The treatments aren't working. The doctor gave me 6 months, maybe less. Eleanor acts devastated, but I've seen her looking at real estate listings when she thinks I'm asleep, planning her new life without me. I should have left years ago, after the incident with Sophia. In the novel, Sophia wasn't a real person from our past, but a fictional character, a colleague with whom the protagonist had considered having an affair but ultimately hadn't. Richard had borrowed the name, perhaps unconsciously, but the incident in the novel was entirely invented. I began laughing, a sound of pure relief that turned to tears as the realization washed over me. Vanessa hadn't found Richard's personal journals at all. She'd found his unpublished novel and, either through ignorance or deliberate deception, presented it to Michael as his father's private thoughts. I called Bernard immediately, explaining my discovery. The journals Michael showed me, they're fiction. Part of a novel Richard was writing. Vanessa either didn't realize that or deliberately misrepresented them. This is excellent news, Bernard said, his voice brightening. We can easily prove they're fictional by comparing them to Richard's actual journals and his other writing. The contrast in style and content should be obvious to anyone. I need to tell Michael right away, I insisted. Let's coordinate with James, Bernard suggested. If he's already arranged to meet Michael tonight, this additional evidence will strengthen the case against Vanessa's manipulation even further. James called back an hour later, confirming that Michael had agreed to meet him for dinner at 7. He seemed relieved to have an excuse to get away for an evening, James reported. Said Vanessa hasn't been feeling well, the pregnancy making her emotional and exhausted. Or the stress of her schemes unraveling, Diane muttered from beside me. I explained about the fictional journals, and James's response was immediate and visceral. My God, I remember that novel. Richard showed me the first few chapters back in 2014, before his diagnosis. He was calling it Terminal Conditions, a play on words about academia and illness. The protagonist was deliberately unlikable, nothing at all like Richard himself. Exactly, I confirmed. But without that context, the passages sound like Richard's own thoughts, especially to Michael, who was young when the affair with the real Sophia happened and never knew the details. This ends tonight, James said with quiet determination. I've known that boy since he was born. I won't let this woman destroy his relationship with his parents' memory or with you. I spent the remaining hours before Michael and James's dinner in a state of nervous anticipation, alternating between hope that my son would finally see the truth and fear that Vanessa's manipulation had gone too deep to overcome. Diane stayed with me, her calm presence a balm to my frayed nerves. What if he doesn't believe it? I asked as the clock approached 7. What if he thinks we're all conspiring against Vanessa? The evidence is overwhelming, Diane reminded me. The recordings of Vanessa threatening Sophia, the novel versus actual journals, her history with other wealthy men. It would take willful blindness to ignore all of that. Love can make people willfully blind, I said softly. And whatever else is happening, I believe Michael does love her. Sometimes love isn't enough, Diane replied, especially when it's built on deception. At 9:15 p.m., my phone rang.
James.
Eleanor, he said, his voice tight with emotion. You need to come to Memorial Hospital. Right away. My blood ran cold. What's happened? Is it Michael? Yes, James confirmed, his voice breaking slightly. There's been an incident. He's asking for you. Is he hurt? I demanded, already reaching for my car keys. Physically, he'll be fine, James assured me. But Eleanor, it's bad. Very bad. I'll explain when you get here. 4th floor, room 417. Diane insisted on driving, for which I was grateful. My hands were shaking too badly to manage the steering wheel safely. 1,000 scenarios raced through my mind during the 20-minute drive to the hospital. Had Vanessa hurt him somehow when he confronted her? Had he been in an accident rushing home after learning the truth? The hospital corridors seemed endless as we made our way to the 4th floor. James was waiting outside room 417, his face grave. What happened? I asked without preamble. Michael learned the truth, he said simply. All of it. I showed him the recordings of Vanessa threatening Sophia, explained about Richard's novel versus his actual journals, shared what I knew about his father's real feelings for you. How did he take it? Hard, James admitted. Very hard at first. Denial, anger, the expected reactions. But as the evidence mounted, he couldn't ignore it anymore. He called Vanessa from the restaurant, confronted her about the novel. And
She panicked.
Started making accusations about you, about me, about everyone being against her. Then she apparently collapsed, claiming severe abdominal pain. Michael rushed home to find her on the bathroom floor. The baby? I asked, my heart clenching despite everything. James's expression turned even grimmer. There's no baby, Eleanor. There never was. The doctors confirmed it as soon as they examined her. She's been faking the pregnancy, padding her clothes, fabricating symptoms, even forging prenatal documents, she showed Michael. The revelation, though not entirely surprising given Diane's research into Vanessa's past, still shocked me with its calculated cruelty. Poor Michael, I whispered. To lose his child, even an imaginary one? He's devastated, James confirmed. But also furious. When the doctor told him Vanessa wasn't pregnant and never had been, she tried to claim she'd had a miscarriage weeks ago but had been afraid to tell him. The doctor confirmed that was medically impossible based on her examination. Where is Vanessa now? Under psychiatric observation in another wing, James explained. She became hysterical when her lie was exposed, started making suicidal statements. Whether genuine or another manipulation, the hospital had to take it seriously. And Michael? He's being treated for shock and exhaustion, James said. But what he needs most right now is his mother. I entered the hospital room quietly. Michael lay in the bed, his face turned toward the window, lines of anguish etched around his eyes. He looked up as I approached, and the naked pain in his expression broke my heart. Mom, he whispered, his voice rough from crying. I moved to his side, taking his hand in mine. I'm here, sweetheart. I'm so sorry, he choked out, tears filling his eyes again. I should have believed you. About everything. Sure, I soothed, stroking his hair as I had when he was a child. You're not to blame for any of this. I chose her, he insisted bitterly. I brought her into our family. I defended her when she was plotting against you, believing her lies about Dad's journals, about the pregnancy. God, Mom, there was never even a baby. The anguish in his voice, as he spoke those last words, tore at my heart. Whatever Vanessa's other deceptions, this one was perhaps the cruelest, allowing Michael to believe he was going to be a father, to dream about and plan for a child that never existed. You couldn't have known, I said gently. Vanessa is very skilled at deception. She fooled many people before you. But I was supposed to love her, Michael said, his voice breaking. How could I not know who she really was? There was no adequate answer to that question, no explanation that could ease the particular pain of discovering the person you've pledged your life to is fundamentally not who you believe them to be. What happens now? He asked after a moment of silence. First you rest, I said firmly. Everything else can wait until you're stronger. The doctors want to keep me overnight for observation, he said. But after that, I can't go back to that house. Not with her things everywhere, all the baby items we'd started collecting. His voice caught on the last words. You'll come home, I said without hesitation. To your old room, for as long as you need. After how I treated you. The things I said. You're my son, Michael, I said simply. Nothing changes that. Nothing ever could. Fresh tears filled his eyes, but there was gratitude mixed with the pain now. I don't deserve you, he whispered. Nonsense, I countered gently. You deserve a mother who loves you unconditionally. Fortunately, that's exactly what you have. I stayed with him until he drifted into an exhausted sleep, the sedative the doctor had prescribed finally taking effect. In the hallway, I found James and Diane waiting, their faces questioning. He's sleeping, I reported, and coming home with me when they release him tomorrow. What about Vanessa?
Diane asked.
One crisis at a time, I said wearily. Right now, Michael needs peace and support. The legal unraveling of this marriage can wait a few days. We were about to leave when Dr. Chun, the oncologist from the Foundation Board, approached us in the corridor, her expression concerned. Eleanor, I heard Michael was admitted. Is everything all right? I explained briefly about the situation, Vanessa's deceptions being exposed, Michael's emotional collapse upon learning the truth. Dr. Chun shook her head in dismay. I'm so sorry your family is going through this. Please let me know if there's anything I can do to help. Actually, I said, a thought occurring to me. There might be. Vanessa is currently under psychiatric observation, but once she's released, I'm concerned about what she might do next. Her pattern has been to escalate when confronted or exposed. You're worried about your safety, Dr. Chen intuited. And Michael's. Yes, I admitted. She's already made threats against Sophia Reeves, implied potential for violence. I don't know what she might do now that all her schemes have collapsed. Dr. Chen considered this. I have a colleague in hospital administration. I could speak with her about placing a security flag on both your and Michael's information in the hospital system, ensuring that no one can obtain information about either of you, including room numbers or whether you're even patients here. That would be very helpful, I said gratefully. And perhaps similar precautions could be taken for the Foundation board members? I wouldn't put it past Vanessa to target anyone associated with me at this point. Consider it done, Dr. Chen assured me. I'll make the calls tonight. Back at home, the house felt different somehow, as if the resolution of the immediate crisis had shifted the energy, making space for healing to begin. Diane helped me prepare Michael's old room, changing the sheets on the bed that had remained largely untouched since he'd moved out years earlier. You should try to get some sleep, she advised as we finished. Tomorrow will be another challenging day. I'm not sure I can sleep, I admitted. Too much has happened too quickly. Understandable, Diane acknowledged. But remember, the immediate danger has passed. Vanessa's deceptions have been exposed. Michael knows the truth. The foundation is secure. Whatever comes next, you've already overcome the worst of it. I hoped she was right, but something in me remained vigilant, unwilling to believe the storm had truly passed. Vanessa had proven herself ruthless and unpredictable. People like that rarely accept defeat gracefully. Morning brought a flurry of activity. Calls from Bernard confirming that Harrington's law firm had withdrawn from representing Vanessa, arrangements for Michael's discharge from the hospital, a visit from a locksmith to change all the exterior locks on my house as a precaution. James drove Michael home at noon, my son still pale and subdued but steadier than he'd been the night before. He moved through the house like a ghost, touching familiar objects as if to reassure himself of their reality after so many illusions had been shattered. "I've spoken with a divorce attorney," he told me as we sat in the kitchen, mugs of untouched tea growing cold between us. "Given the circumstances, the fraud, the documented threats against you and Sophia, they believe we can expedite things, possibly have the marriage annulled rather than dissolved through standard divorce proceedings." "That's good," I said cautiously, watching his face for signs of renewed distress. "I just want it over," he said quietly. "I want her out of our lives as quickly and completely as possible." "Bernard can help coordinate with your attorney," I offered. "Ensure all the evidence we've gathered is properly presented." Michael nodded, then asked the question that had clearly been weighing on him. "Do you think she ever loved me at all? Even a little?" The naked vulnerability in his voice broke my heart. How to answer such a question? The truth, that Vanessa had almost certainly targeted him for his family's assets rather than any genuine affection, would only deepen his pain. Yet a comforting lie seemed equally cruel in the long run. "I think Vanessa's understanding of love is fundamentally different from yours," I said carefully. "I believe she was drawn to qualities in you, your kindness, your stability, your trustworthy nature. But I don't think she knows how to love someone for who they are rather than what they can provide." It wasn't quite an answer, but Michael seemed to accept it, nodding slowly. "That's a generous way to look at it. You deserved better," I said simply. "And someday, when you're ready, you'll find it." The days that followed fell into a strained routine. Michael began the legal process of ending his marriage, working remotely from his old bedroom, emerging mainly for meals that he picked at without appetite. I gave him space while remaining available, respecting his need to process his grief and betrayal in his own way. A week after Michael's return home, Bernard called with unexpected news. "Vanessa's left the country," he reported. "Flew to Belize yesterday on a one-way ticket. According to my sources, she emptied her personal accounts before leaving." "Can she do that? Just leave in the middle of legal proceedings?" "It complicates things," Bernard admitted, "but might actually work in Michael's favor. If she fails to respond to the divorce petition, the court can grant it by default, potentially with more favorable terms for Michael." I relayed this information to Michael, who received it with a mixture of relief and lingering anger. "Running away," he said bitterly. "That fits. When her schemes fail, she doesn't stick around to face consequences." "At least it means she's no longer a threat," I pointed out. "If she's left the country, she can't continue to harass us or the Foundation." Michael wasn't so easily reassured. "She'll surface somewhere else, find another target. That's what people like her do." His cynicism worried me, so unlike the optimistic, trusting son I'd raised. But perhaps a certain amount of disillusionment was inevitable after what he'd experienced. Time would tell whether this hardened edge would soften again or become a permanent part of his character. 2 days later, a certified letter arrived from Belize, Vanessa's response to the divorce petition. She was not contesting it, agreed to all terms including the annulment on grounds of fraud, and waived any claim to marital assets. Her only request was that Michael make no public statements about the circumstances of their separation. "This is unusually reasonable," Bernard observed when I called to inform him. Almost suspiciously so. "You think there's a catch?" I asked. "I think Vanessa Miller doesn't surrender without getting something in return," Bernard said cautiously. "The question is, what does she gain from this quick, quiet resolution?" "A clean escape," Michael suggested when I shared Bernard's concerns. "No legal battle means no public record of her deceptions. She can create a new identity, target someone else without the baggage of a scandalous divorce following her." It made sense in a disturbing way. By agreeing to Michael's terms completely, Vanessa preserved her ability to reinvent herself elsewhere, to weave new webs for new victims who would have no warning of her true nature. Should we try to stop her somehow? I wondered aloud. Warn potential future victims?
How?
Michael asked practically. We don't know where she'll go next, who she'll target. And any public accusations without a legal judgment behind them could backfire, even open us to defamation claims. He was right, of course. There was no practical way to protect unknown future victims from Vanessa's manipulations. The best we could do was resolve our own situation cleanly and completely, then move forward with our lives. The annulment was granted 3 weeks later, a remarkably swift resolution made possible by the overwhelming evidence of fraud and Vanessa's uncontested agreement to the terms. Michael seemed to visibly lighten as he signed the final papers, as if physically setting down a burden he'd been carrying. It's really over, he said that evening as we sat on the porch, watching the sunset. Legally, officially over. How do you feel? I asked gently. He considered the question, sipping the scotch he'd poured to mark the occasion.
Relieved.
Embarrassed. Wiser, maybe. Definitely more cautious. He glanced at me, but also grateful. For you, for James, for Diane and Bernard. For everyone who helped me see the truth before. He trailed off. Before it was too late, I finished for him. Before she managed to separate you from everyone who truly cares about you. That was her real goal, wasn't it? He mused. Not just the beach house or the foundation money, but isolating me completely, making me dependent on her version of reality. It's a common tactic of manipulators, I confirmed. And she nearly succeeded. But she didn't, Michael said, a hint of his old determination returning to his voice. We stopped her. You stopped her, Mom. Even when I was fighting you every step of the way. I wasn't going to lose my son without a fight, I said simply. We sat in companionable silence for a while, the evening gradually deepening around us. Finally, Michael spoke again, his voice thoughtful. I've been thinking about the beach house, he said. About why its loss hit me so hard. It was your childhood, I suggested. So many memories. Yes, but it was more than that, he reflected. It represented something permanent. Unchanging. In a world where everything else shifts and transforms, the beach house was constant. The same porch swing, the same creaky third step, the same view of the ocean from Dad's study. I nodded, understanding perfectly. A physical anchor for your sense of identity and family. Exactly, he agreed. Which is why Vanessa targeted it so specifically. She somehow intuited its emotional significance, knew that controlling the beach house meant controlling a core part of our family narrative. She was very perceptive about vulnerabilities, I acknowledged. But in the end, she underestimated our strength. Michael smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes for the first time in weeks. She certainly underestimated you, Mom. The proper, dignified widow who was supposed to quietly accept being shipped off to a nursing home. Perhaps that was her first mistake, I mused. Seeing me as a stereotype rather than a person. The beach house was important, yes, but not as important as my dignity and autonomy. I think I understand that now, Michael said. Why you chose to sell it rather than fight a prolonged battle to keep it. The house itself wasn't what mattered most. No, I agreed. What mattered was refusing to be victimized, refusing to surrender control of my life and choices. The foundation honors your father's memory far better than clinging to a property ever could. Speaking of the foundation, Michael said, setting down his glass. I've been meaning to ask you something. Would there be a place for me on the board? Not as a trustee, he added quickly. I understand why that structure needs to remain as it is. But perhaps in some advisory capacity. The request touched me deeply. Of course, I said warmly. Your perspective would be invaluable, especially regarding the nursing scholarship programs. And it would give us a chance to work together on something meaningful. I'd like that, he said simply. 2 months later, life had settled into a new normal. Michael had found an apartment of his own, close enough for regular visits, but giving us both the independence we needed. He joined the Foundation's advisory committee, bringing fresh ideas and energy to our projects. The trauma of Vanessa's betrayal remained, but its sharp edges had begun to soften with time and distance. I was reviewing grant applications in Richard's study, now my study, when the doorbell rang. Opening it, I found a courier with a large envelope requiring my signature. Inside was a handwritten letter with a Belize postmark and a small key. The letter, in Vanessa's distinctive handwriting, was brief. Eleanor, by now you've won. Completely,
Thoroughly.
Congratulations on outmaneuvering me. Few have managed it before. The enclosed key opens a storage unit in Centerville, number 247 at Secure Storage on Maple Avenue. Inside you'll find Richard's journals and other items I took from the beach house. You might want them for sentimental reasons, though they serve their purpose for me.
Don't bother looking for me.
By the time you receive this, I'll be somewhere new, with a new name and a new life. Some of us aren't meant for happy endings. We're meant to create chaos in other people's stories. But know this, you haven't seen the last of me. The beach house was just the beginning. I always finish what I start. I stared at the letter, a chill running through me despite the warm September afternoon. Was this a genuine threat or a final, impotent attempt to leave me feeling unsettled? I couldn't be sure, but I wouldn't allow Vanessa to rob me of the peace we'd finally achieved. I called Di and immediately, reading her the letter. Typical manipulator's tactic, she assessed. Unable to accept defeat, she needs to leave with a vague threat that keeps her relevant in your mind. Should we be concerned? I asked. Cautious, yes. Concerned, not necessarily, Diane advised. She's likely halfway across the world by now, focused on her next target. But I'll accompany you to check out that storage unit, just to be safe. The following day, Diane and I drove to Secure Storage. Unit number 247 was a small space containing a single cardboard box. Inside were Richard's actual journals, not the fictional ones Vanessa had misrepresented to Michael, but his genuine personal diaries spanning decades of our marriage. With trembling hands, I opened one from his final year, bracing myself for whatever painful truths it might contain. Instead, I found entry after entry of gratitude and love. March 3rd, 2015. Another difficult night. The pain medication makes me groggy, but Ellie sits beside me, reading aloud from that mystery series I enjoy. 40 years together, and still she finds ways to bring me comfort. How did I get so lucky? April 17th, 2015. Bad news at the doctor today. Treatment options dwindling. Ellie was stronger than I was, asking all the right questions while I sat there in shock. On the drive home, she took my hand and said, "We'll face this together, every step." And I believe her. I've always believed her. Tears blurred my vision as I read. These were Richard's true thoughts during his illness, not the bitter fictional narrative Vanessa had weaponized, but reflections of a man grateful for our life together even as it neared its end. "He loved you deeply," Diane observed quietly, glancing at the pages. Yes, I agreed, closing the journal carefully.
He did.
And Vanessa couldn't tarnish that, no matter how hard she tried. We took the box and left, closing this final chapter of Vanessa's intrusion into our lives. The vague threat in her letter lingered in my mind occasionally in the weeks that followed, but I refused to give it power over me. Whatever her intentions, wherever she was, she no longer controlled our family's story. 1 month later, on a crisp October evening, Michael and I hosted a small gathering at my home. The foundation board members, James, Diane, Bernard, and a few close family friends. We were celebrating the foundation's first major achievement, full funding for a dedicated pancreatic cancer research position at Memorial Hospital, named in Richard's honor. As champagne flowed and conversation hummed around me, I found myself standing by the window, looking out at the garden Richard had loved so much. Michael joined me, following my gaze to the Japanese maple tree now blazing crimson in the autumn light. "Dad would have loved this," he said softly. "Not just the tree, but what we've accomplished with the foundation." Yes, I agreed. He would have. "Do you ever regret selling the beach house?" he asked, a question he hadn't posed since the truth about Vanessa had emerged. I considered carefully before answering. "I regret the circumstances that made it necessary," I said finally, "but not the decision itself. The beach house gave us wonderful memories, but it was just a building. What matters is what we've built since. The foundation, our relationship, this new chapter of our lives. Michael nodded, understanding in his eyes. I've been thinking about what you said that night on the porch, about dignity and autonomy being more important than any property. You were right. It was a hard-won lesson, I acknowledged. Mom, he hesitated, then continued. I've met someone. Nothing serious yet, but promising. I'd like you to meet her, when the time is right. I'd like that, I said warmly, touched by his trust after everything he'd been through. I'm being careful this time, he assured me. Taking things slowly, asking the right questions, watching for red flags. Good, I approved. But don't let Vanessa's betrayal close your heart completely. That would be her final victory. It won't, he promised. If anything, I know better now what real love looks like. I had the perfect example growing up. He hugged me then, this son who had nearly been lost to a manipulator's schemes, and I felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over me. We had weathered the storm together and emerged stronger for it. Later that night, after the guests had departed and the house was quiet once more, I sat in Richard's study, surrounded by his books, his journals safely returned to their rightful place on the shelf. I opened one at random, smiling at his familiar handwriting. September 15th, 1998. Watched Ellie stand her ground in that school board meeting today. They didn't know what hit them. I've always admired her strength, her unwillingness to be intimidated when she knows she's right. It's a quality I hope Michael inherits, that quiet, unshakable resolve that doesn't seek confrontation but never backs down from one when principles are at stake. Richard had seen that quality in me long before I'd had to demonstrate it against Vanessa. Perhaps he had known me better than I knew myself. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the leaves of the Japanese maple. Winter would come soon, bringing its own challenges, its own beauty. But for now, in this moment of hard-won peace, I was exactly where I needed to be. Not in a beach house from the past, but in a present I had fought for and a future I had secured. The beach house was gone, but what it had represented, family, legacy, memory, remained intact, transformed into something even more meaningful. Vanessa had failed to understand that buildings can be sold, but the foundation of a true family is built on something far more enduring than property. It's built on love, on trust, on standing firm when the tide rises against you. And on that foundation, there is no room for fear of what might come next, only anticipation of new chapters yet to be written. 6 months passed with no further word from Vanessa. The winter had given way to spring, bringing renewal both literal and metaphorical to our lives. Michael had moved forward with his new relationship, a thoughtful pediatrician named Claire who approached life with a gentle wisdom that complemented his more analytical nature. They were taking things slowly, both cognizant of his recent trauma, but the genuine affection between them was evident. The foundation was thriving, having funded not only the research position at Memorial Hospital but also 15 nursing scholarships for promising students from underprivileged backgrounds. I had settled into my role as primary trustee with growing confidence, finding unexpected fulfillment in this new chapter of my life. The beach house, now owned by the Schumanns, had undergone extensive renovations according to local gossip. I hadn't driven past it since that day I'd seen Vanessa emerging with Richard's journals, preferring to leave those memories undisturbed. The property belonged to someone else now, as did that chapter of our family history. Or so I thought. The letter arrived on a brilliant May morning, official-looking with the letterhead of Montgomery and Associates, a law firm I didn't recognize. Inside was a formal notice that chilled me to the bone. Estate of Hans Schumann. Dear Mrs. Lambert, this office represents the estate of the late Hans Schumann, who passed away on April 12th. In accordance with Mr. Schumann's last will and testament, we are instructed to inform you that you have been granted right of first refusal to repurchase the property at 1742 Ocean Drive, previously owned by you and sold to Mr. and Mrs. Schumann 6 months ago. Should you wish to exercise this option, the property would be available at the same price for which it was sold to the Schumanns, minus a 10% consideration as specified by Mr. Schumann. This offer remains valid for 30 days from the date of this letter. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience to discuss this matter further. Sincerely, Jonathan Montgomery, ESQ. I read the letter 3 times, trying to make sense of it. Hans Schumann, the Swiss businessman who had purchased our beach house, was dead, and he had left specific instructions offering me the chance to buy it back. I called Bernard immediately. "This is unusual," he acknowledged after I'd read him the letter. "Though not unprecedented. Sometimes buyers include such provisions if they form a sentimental attachment to the property's history or previous owners." "But I never even met Hans Schumann," I pointed out. "You handled the entire transaction." "True," Bernard mused. "Perhaps he was impressed by the foundation you established with the proceeds? It received some positive press in financial circles." "Perhaps," I agreed, though something about the situation felt off. "Could you look into this law firm? Verify they're legitimate?" "Of course," Bernard promised. "And Eleanor, don't make any decisions until we have more information. This could be completely above board, but given recent events—" "I know," I said grimly. "Given Vanessa, we need to be certain." Bernard called back that afternoon, his tone carefully neutral. "Montgomery and Associates is legitimate. A small but reputable firm specializing in estate law." I spoke with Jonathan Montgomery himself, who confirmed the letter's authenticity. "And Hans Schumann did indeed pass away last month. Heart attack, according to Montgomery. Ingrid Schumann is the primary beneficiary of his estate, but certain specific provisions were included in his will, including this right of first refusal for you regarding the beach house." "It still doesn't make sense," I insisted. "Why would a man I never met make such an arrangement?" "Montgomery couldn't or wouldn't elaborate," Bernard replied. "Client confidentiality. But he did confirm that the offer is genuine. If you want the beach house back, it's available at 90% of what you sold it for." I sat with this information, turning it over in my mind. On the surface, it seemed like an incredible stroke of luck, a chance to reclaim a beloved family property at a discount. But the timing, the circumstances, something nagged at me. "What do you think I should do?" I asked Bernard. "Financially, it's an excellent opportunity," he said cautiously. "Property values in that area have increased nearly 15% since you sold, so you'd be acquiring it well below current market value. But Eleanor, I understand your hesitation. After everything with Vanessa, anything unexpected warrants careful scrutiny." "I need to think about it," I decided. "And I should talk to Michael." The beach house meant as much to him as it did to me. Michael was understandably shocked when I called him with the news. "That's incredible," he said, clearly struggling to process it. "Do you think it's legitimate?" "Bernard says the law firm is real. The offer is genuine. But it feels too convenient, doesn't it? After everything that happened." "It does," Michael agreed. "But, Mom, if it is legitimate, if there's a chance to get the beach house back, don't you want to take it?" "I'm not sure," I admitted. "I've made peace with that decision. The foundation is doing important work. And bringing the beach house back into our lives, it feels like reopening a wound that's finally started to heal." "I understand," he said softly. "But maybe it's not reopening a wound. Maybe it's completing the circle, reclaiming something that was taken from us unfairly." "The beach house wasn't taken," I reminded him gently. "I chose to sell it." "Because of Vanessa's threats," he countered. "It wasn't a choice made freely, Mom. It was a defensive move in a war you didn't start." He had a point, one I hadn't fully considered. The beach house sale had been a reaction to Vanessa's schemes, a way to protect myself from her plans. But now, with Vanessa gone and the threat neutralized, would reclaiming the property represent a true victory? "Let me do some research," Michael offered. "About Hans Schumann, about how he died, about any connection he might have had to our family that could explain this. Before you decide, let's make sure we have all the facts." I agreed, grateful for his analytical approach. Over the next few days, Michael dug into Hans Schumann's background while I spoke with Dr. Chun and the other Foundation board members about the potential financial implications of repurchasing the beach house. "The Foundation is financially secure," Dr. Chun assured me. The initial grants and scholarships are fully funded for the next 3 years. If you choose to repurchase the property, it wouldn't impact our current commitments. But future initiatives would be affected, Professor Washington pointed out. We've been discussing expanding the research program to include preventative screening protocols. That's true, I acknowledged. It's a question of priorities, and whether owning the beach house again would truly benefit our family more than continuing to fund these programs. A week after the initial letter, Michael came to dinner with a thick folder of research. Hans Schumann, he began, spreading documents across the dining table, was a 68-year-old investment banker, semi-retired. Swiss citizen, but with homes in several countries. Married to Ingrid for 40 years, no children. He specialized in art investments and real estate, particularly historic or significant properties. Nothing unusual there, I observed. That fits the profile of someone who might purchase a beachfront property as an investment. Yes, Michael agreed. But here's where it gets interesting. He pulled out a newspaper clipping, a society page from 15 years earlier, showing a younger Hans Schumann at a charity gala. Look who else is in this photo. I peered at the image, scanning the elegantly dressed crowd until my gaze landed on a familiar face. Walter Green. I gasped, recognizing the man Vanessa had once been engaged to before targeting Michael. Exactly, Michael said grimly. Hans Schumann and Walter Green were associates, possibly friends. They served on the board of the same international investment group for nearly a decade. So there's a connection to Vanessa, I said slowly, the pieces beginning to align. But what does it mean? Why would an associate of her former fiancé offer us the beach house? I'm not sure yet, Michael admitted. But there's more. He produced another document, a death certificate. Hans Schumann died of a heart attack, as Bernard was told. But what Montgomery apparently didn't mention was where he died. I scanned the certificate, my blood running cold as I read the location of death. Belize City, Belize. The same country where Vanessa fled after our annulment, Michael confirmed. Perhaps the exact same city. This can't be coincidence, I murmured, my earlier misgivings intensifying. Somehow, Vanessa is connected to this offer. That's my guess, Michael agreed. But I can't figure out her angle. If she's somehow manipulated this situation, what does she gain by offering us the beach house back? Control, I suggested, the word emerging from some intuitive understanding of Vanessa's psychology. If we take back the beach house, we're re-entering her narrative, playing by rules she's established. Or it could be simpler, Michael proposed. Maybe it's a trap of some kind. Get us to commit financially to repurchasing the property, then pull the rug out from under us somehow. Either way, I concluded, it seems clear we should decline the offer. But as the words left my mouth, I felt an unexpected pang of regret. Despite the suspicious circumstances, despite all logic suggesting this was somehow Vanessa's manipulation, part of me still yearned for the beach house, for the tangible connection to Richard, to our family history, to decades of memories embedded in its walls. Unless, Michael began, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. Unless what? Unless we use this to draw her out, he suggested. Turn her own trap against her. The idea was bold, perhaps reckless, but intriguing. How would that work? We express interest in repurchasing the property, Michael explained, warming to his strategy. Go through the motions, but with our eyes wide open. If Vanessa is behind this somehow, she'll eventually show her hand. And when she does, we'll be ready. It's risky, I cautioned, financially and emotionally. We would set strict boundaries, he assured me. No money changes hands until everything is thoroughly vetted. Bernard can help ensure all legal protections are in place. And Diane could investigate the Schumann's property purchase more thoroughly, see if there were any irregularities we missed the first time. I considered the proposal, weighing the potential risks against the opportunity to finally confront whatever scheme Vanessa had set in motion, and perhaps, if fortune favored us, to reclaim the beach house legitimately. Let me think about it, I said finally. This isn't a decision to make impulsively. After Michael left that evening, I found myself drawn once again to Richard's study, to the journals that had become my comfort and counsel in difficult moments. I opened one from early in our marriage, smiling at his description of our first summer at the beach house. July 8th, 1976. Moved into the beach house today. Eleanor's vision for the place is already taking shape. Whitewashed walls, blue accents that echo the ocean, windows opened wide to let in the sea breeze. Michael, not yet 2, toddled across the deck, fascinated by the waves. This place feels right somehow, as if it's been waiting for us. A haven where our little family can grow together. The entry brought tears to my eyes. We had been so young then, so full of hope and plans for the future. The beach house had indeed become our haven, through job changes, health scares, Michael's tumultuous teenage years, and eventually, Richard's final illness. Was I ready to reclaim that haven, knowing it might be part of Vanessa's manipulation? Or was I stronger remaining detached from it, focused on the foundation and the future rather than the property and the past? I called Diane the next morning, explaining Michael's theory and our tentative plan to investigate the offer while appearing to accept it. It could work, she acknowledged after considering the strategy. But it's not without risk. Vanessa has proven herself resourceful and unpredictable. If she is behind this, she'll have contingencies in place. That's why we need to be extremely careful, I agreed. Can you look into the Schumanns more deeply? Especially their connection to Walter Green and any activities in Belize. Already on it, Diane assured me. I've had some concerns about the original sale since you told me about Vanessa's letter from Belize. This new information about Hans Schumann's death there only increases my suspicion. With Diane investigating and Bernard preparing legal safeguards, we moved forward cautiously. I responded to Montgomery's letter expressing interest in the repurchase option but requesting a face-to-face meeting and full documentation of the property's current condition before proceeding. Montgomery agreed readily, suggesting a meeting at the beach house itself so I could inspect the property personally. Mrs. Schumann is currently in Europe handling her husband's affairs, he explained over the phone, but she has authorized me to provide complete access to the property. The meeting was set for the following Tuesday. Michael insisted on accompanying me, as did Diane, who would pose as a property inspector to allow her to examine the house thoroughly. As we drove along the familiar coastal road, I felt a growing sense of anticipation, mixed with apprehension. It had been months since I'd seen the beach house, longer still since I'd been inside it. What changes would the Schumanns have made? Would it still feel like ours? Or would it have been transformed beyond recognition? The answer, when we pulled into the driveway, was somewhere in between. The exterior remained largely the same, the weathered gray shingles, white trim, wraparound porch, but with subtle upgrades, new windows, a redesigned entrance path, landscape lighting nestled among native plantings. Jonathan Montgomery waited on the porch, a tall, distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and a carefully trimmed beard. He greeted us with professional courtesy, if not warmth. Mrs. Lambert, a pleasure to meet you in person. Mr. Lambert, Ms. Miller. He nodded to Michael and Diane, accepting without question our introduction of Diane under a false name. Shall we begin the tour? The interior had been more extensively renovated, walls moved to create a more open floor plan, the kitchen entirely modernized, bathrooms updated with luxury fixtures. Yet despite these changes, the essence of the house remained. The view of the ocean from the living room windows, the way light filtered through the study in the late afternoon, the sound of waves audible throughout the space, these fundamentals were unchanged. The Schumanns invested approximately $380,000 in renovations, Montgomery explained as we toured the upper floor. However, per Mr. Schumann's instructions, the repurchase price remains based on the original sale value, not including these improvements. That's very generous, I observed, my suspicion deepening. Why would anyone offer a significantly upgraded property at below its original purchase price, let alone its enhanced value? Mr. Schumann was a man of specific intentions, Montgomery replied cryptically. He felt this property belonged with your family, Mrs. Lambert. The details of why were private, but his instructions were explicit. While Montgomery showed Michael the upgraded deck system, Diane seized the opportunity to inspect the master bedroom more thoroughly, examining closets, electrical outlets, and window frames with professional attention to detail. Everything appears to be in excellent condition, she announced when Montgomery returned, maintaining her cover as a property inspector. High-quality renovations, properly permitted from what I can see. Of course, Montgomery nodded. The Schumanns spared no expense. They intended this to be their summer residence for many years. What changed? Michael asked directly. Why would Mrs. Schumann sell so soon after these extensive renovations? A flicker of something discomfort? Caution crossed Montgomery's face. My understanding is that without her husband, Mrs. Schumann no longer wishes to maintain a property in this country. She has other homes that hold fewer associations with her loss. It was a reasonable explanation, yet something in his delivery felt rehearsed, as if he were reciting a prepared response rather than offering genuine insight. As we concluded the tour, Montgomery presented me with a folder of documents, property assessments, renovation permits, tax information, and the formal repurchase agreement. Take your time reviewing these, he suggested. The 30-day option period gives you ample opportunity for due diligence. Should you decide to proceed, my office will handle all transfer details. And Mrs. Schumann? I asked. Will she be involved in the process at all? She has granted me full authority to complete the transaction, Montgomery assured me. Given her current circumstances, she prefers minimal involvement. We left with the documentation and a set of keys to allow further inspections if desired. As we drove away, the three of us exchanged glances loaded with unspoken concerns. Thoughts? I asked once we were safely out of earshot. The renovations are real, Diane observed. High-quality work, recent completion. Someone spent serious money upgrading that house. But the offer still doesn't make sense, Michael insisted. No one invests nearly $400,000 in renovations, then sells at a loss 6 months later, even after a death in the family. Unless there's another motivation, I suggested. Something beyond financial considerations. I need to look into Montgomery more thoroughly, Diane decided, and Mrs. Schumann's whereabouts in Europe. If we can verify she's actually there, not in Belize with Vanessa? The house itself seemed normal to you? Michael asked her. Nothing suspicious during your inspection. Nothing obvious, Diane admitted. No signs of surveillance equipment or structural concerns. But I'd want a professional sweep before you considered moving back in. I'm not sure we're at that point yet, I cautioned. This still feels like a setup of some kind. We need more information before making any decisions. Back at home, we spread the documents across the dining room table, examining each page with meticulous attention. The paperwork appeared legitimate, proper letterhead, appropriate legal language, consistent with standard real estate transactions. If this is a scam, Michael observed, it's an elaborate one. Vanessa excels at elaborate, I reminded him. And she has motivation to go to extreme lengths where we're concerned. Bernard arrived an hour later, examining the documents with professional scrutiny. The repurchase agreement itself is straightforward, he concluded. Actually quite favorable to you, with minimal contingencies and a clear timeline. If taken at face value, it's an excellent opportunity. That's the problem, I pointed out. It's too favorable, too convenient. Agreed, Bernard nodded. Which is why I've taken the liberty of contacting some associates in Switzerland, attempting to verify the Schumann's background more thoroughly. We should have additional information within a few days. For the next week, we gathered information from multiple sources. Diane's investigation into Montgomery revealed nothing overtly suspicious. A respected attorney with 30 years of practice, no disciplinary actions, a specialization in estate law consistent with his role in this transaction. Bernard's Swiss contacts confirmed that Hans and Ingrid Schumann were indeed wealthy property investors with residences in several countries, including a villa in Belize where Hans had been staying when he suffered his fatal heart attack. Ingrid was currently in Zurich, according to official records, handling the complex international aspects of her husband's estate. Everything checks out on paper, Diane acknowledged during our strategy meeting 10 days after visiting the beach house. But I still can't shake the feeling that something's not right. Neither can I agreed. But what's our next move? The option period expires in 16 days. We need to decide whether to proceed or walk away. I think we need to meet Ingrid Schumann, Michael suggested. If she's legitimately in Zurich handling her husband's estate, surely she could spare an hour for a video call with the potential buyers of their American property. That could force Vanessa's hand. If she's involved, Bernard agreed. A reasonable request that would be difficult to refuse without raising suspicions. I nodded, the strategy making sense. Montgomery is our liaison. I'll contact him tomorrow, request a video meeting with Mrs. Schumann to discuss some questions about the property and the terms. Montgomery's response to my request was politely evasive. Mrs. Schumann is dealing with complex legal matters in several jurisdictions, he explained. Her schedule is extraordinarily demanding at present. Perhaps I could address your questions in her stead. I appreciate that, I replied firmly, but some of my concerns relate specifically to the Schumann's experience with the property, aspects only the owner could address. Given the unusual nature of this repurchase offer, I believe a brief conversation with Mrs. Schumann is a reasonable expectation before proceeding. After some back and forth, Montgomery reluctantly agreed to arrange a video call for the following Friday, the 25th day of our 30-day option period. I noted with suspicion. The timing left little room for additional investigation before we would need to make our decision. The intervening days passed in a state of heightened vigilance. I found myself scanning crowds for Vanessa's face, checking the security cameras Bernard had installed around my home more frequently, startling at unexpected sounds. The possibility of reclaiming the beach house had reopened emotional pathways I thought had been resolved, leaving me both hopeful and wary. Friday arrived with a sense of impending revelation. Bernard, Michael, Diane, and I gathered in Bernard's office for the scheduled video call, each of us prepared with specific questions designed to verify Ingrid Schumann's identity and motivations. At precisely 10 a.m., Montgomery's face appeared on the large conference room screen. "Good morning," he greeted us, his expression more strained than during our in-person meeting. "I regret to inform you that Mrs. Schumann has been unexpectedly delayed. A legal matter in Geneva required her immediate attention." "How convenient," Michael muttered, just loudly enough to be heard. Montgomery's expression tightened further. "I assure you, this is a legitimate complication. Mrs. Schumann has authorized me to extend the option period by an additional 2 weeks to accommodate this delay." "That's very considerate," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. However, given the unusual circumstances of this offer, I remain uncomfortable proceeding without speaking directly to Mrs. Schumann. "I understand your concern," Montgomery acknowledged. "Perhaps I can offer an alternative. Mrs. Schumann has prepared a written statement addressing some questions she anticipated you might have. Would reviewing that be helpful while we reschedule the video call?" "It would be a start," Bernard interjected smoothly. "We'd be happy to receive her statement." Montgomery nodded, relief evident in his expression. "I'll email it immediately. And I'll work with Mrs. Schumann's assistant to find a suitable time for the video call next week." After the call ended, we exchanged knowing glances. "We're being stalled," Diane stated flatly. "Clearly," Bernard agreed. "The question is why? What happens if we reach the end of even this extended option period without meeting Mrs. Schumann?" "Either we walk away," Michael theorized, "which might be their goal if this is some kind of psychological manipulation. Or we proceed despite our reservations," I finished, potentially walking into whatever trap has been set. Montgomery's email arrived 20 minutes later, containing a letter ostensibly from Ingrid Schumann. The statement was detailed and personal, explaining how Hans had admired the history of the beach house and had felt, after purchasing it, that it truly belonged with a family that had loved it for generations. "My husband was a romantic at heart," the letter read. "He believed certain properties hold the energy of the families who cherish them. After your son's unfortunate marital situation became known to us through mutual connections, Hans felt responsible for having purchased your home during such a difficult time. This repurchase opportunity is his way of setting things right." "Mutual connections," Diane repeated, highlighting the phrase. That's the closest we've come to an acknowledgement of the Schumann-Green-Vanessa connection. It's also surprisingly specific about Michael's unfortunate marital situation, Bernard observed. How would the Schumanns know those details unless someone directly involved had informed them? Vanessa, Michael said grimly. She must have connected with the Schumanns through Walter Green, perhaps even before they purchased the house. Which suggests this entire situation, from the initial purchase to this repurchase offer, might have been orchestrated as part of a longer-term plan, I concluded, the realization chilling me. The letter, while raising more questions than it answered, did provide one useful piece of information, a phone number purportedly for Ingrid Schumann's personal assistant in Zurich. We could try to verify if this is legitimate, Diane suggested. I have contacts who could help determine if this is a real Swiss phone number, actively in use. While Diane pursued that angle, Bernard and his team began a deeper investigation into the beach house renovations, who had performed the work, when it had been completed, whether the reported $380,000 expenditure could be verified through permits and contractor records. 3 days later, we reconvened with our findings. The phone number is legitimate, Diane reported. Registered to a Zurich office building where several international investment firms maintain headquarters. Calls are answered by a professional receptionist who confirms messages for Mrs. Schumann will be delivered to her assistant. That doesn't mean Ingrid Schumann actually exists or receives those messages, Michael pointed out. True, Diane acknowledged. But it's a sophisticated setup if it's fraudulent. Not impossible for someone with Vanessa's connections and resources, but requiring significant effort. Bernard's investigation had yielded more concrete results. The renovations are real, he confirmed. Permits filed, inspections passed, contractors paid, all verifiable through public records. Local suppliers confirmed delivering materials to the property over a 4-month period. The work was completed approximately 6 weeks before Hans Schumann's death. So someone really did invest significant money in upgrading the house, I mused. Which makes the below-market repurchase offer even more suspicious. There's one more thing, Bernard added, his expression grave. I received a call this morning from a former client who works in international banking. He happened to mention a fraud alert regarding Walter Green's investment firm. Apparently, several of his clients have reported unauthorized transfers to accounts in Belize over the past 3 months. Vanessa, Michael and I said simultaneously. It appears likely, Bernard agreed. The timing coincides with her disappearance, and the pattern matches her previous financial schemes. So, what's our theory? Asked, trying to piece together the fragments of information. Vanessa connected with the Schumanns through Walter Green, somehow orchestrated their purchase of our beach house. Then what? Arranged Hans Schumann's death? Created this elaborate repurchase scenario. It does seem excessively complicated, Diane acknowledged. Even for Vanessa. Unless the beach house itself is somehow central to her plan, Michael suggested. Maybe there's something about the property we're missing. This observation sparked a memory, something I'd noticed during our tour but hadn't fully registered at the time. The renovations, I said slowly. They changed the layout, modernized everything, but they also added something. A wine cellar, I think Montgomery called it, in the space under the deck that used to just be storage. A wine cellar wasn't on the renovation permits, Bernard noted, consulting his files. At least not specifically. There was a general permit for below-grade improvements, but no details. I want to see that cellar again, I decided. Something about it bothers me. After some negotiation with Montgomery, we arranged another visit to the property, ostensibly to take measurements for furniture planning, in anticipation of completing the purchase. Montgomery couldn't accompany us personally, but provided a lockbox code for access, asking only that we secure the house when leaving. This time, Diane brought professional equipment, discrete scanning devices to detect surveillance or other electronic installations. Michael and I focused on examining the wine cellar, the one completely new addition to the house. The space was beautifully constructed, temperature-controlled, custom cedar racks, subtle lighting, but curiously empty of actual wine. Only a few token bottles occupied the racks designed to hold hundreds. The Schumanns hadn't stocked it yet, Michael guessed, running his hand along the polished wood. or they removed their collection before offering the house back to us. I examined the far wall, where built-in cabinets had been installed for storing accessories. Something about the proportions seemed off. "This wall," I said, measuring with my eyes. "It doesn't align with the deck above. There should be another 3 feet of space." Michael caught my meaning immediately, pulling out a measuring tape from his pocket. He confirmed my suspicion. The back wall of the wine cellar ended several feet before the exterior foundation wall should have been. "There's a hidden space behind this," he said, excitement and apprehension mingling in his voice. "A concealed room or compartment." We began examining the cabinetry carefully, looking for any mechanism that might reveal a hidden door. After several minutes of searching, Diane joined us, having completed her electronic sweep of the upper floors. "Found anything interesting?" she asked. "Possibly." I explained our discovery of the misaligned measurements. "There's space behind this wall that's unaccounted for." Diane pulled out a compact thermal scanner from her equipment bag. "Let's see if we can detect any temperature differences that might indicate an opening." The scanner revealed a subtle rectangular outline in the center cabinet, slightly cooler than the surrounding wood, suggesting a different material or air gap behind. "There," Diane pointed. "That panel is different from the others." Michael pressed various spots around the rectangle, searching for a trigger mechanism. A soft click rewarded his efforts, and the panels swung inward silently, revealing a narrow passage beyond. "Should we?" Michael asked, hesitating at the threshold. "We've come this far," I replied, though anxiety tightened my chest. What might Vanessa have hidden in the heart of our former home? Diane produced a flashlight, taking the lead as we entered the narrow passage. It extended about 10 feet, opening into a small room roughly the size of a walk-in closet. Unlike the luxurious wine cellar, this space was utilitarian. Concrete walls, basic shelving, a small desk with a computer terminal. "What is this?" Michael wondered aloud, surveying the sparse room. Diane approached the computer with professional caution. "It's powered on in sleep mode," she observed, moving the mouse to wake the screen. A password prompt appeared. "Let me try something," Michael suggested, leaning over to type. He entered Vanessa. Nothing. Then Miller, still locked. After a moment's thought, he typed beach house, and the screen unlocked. "Predictable," he muttered. "She always did underestimate us." The computer contained a single folder labeled Insurance. Inside were hundreds of files, financial records, photographs, audio recordings, personal documents. As we began examining them, the truth emerged with horrifying clarity. "These are blackmail files," Diane said, her voice tight. "Dossiers on wealthy individuals, evidence of financial improprieties, personal indiscretions, medical information." "Hans Schumann," Michael pointed to one folder. "Walter Green." "At least a dozen other names I don't recognize." I clicked on Schumann's folder, finding detailed records of what appeared to be tax evasion schemes, offshore accounts, conversations with financial advisors about concealing assets. Similar patterns appeared in the other folders, each containing compromising information unique to its subject. This is Vanessa's insurance policy, I realized. Her leverage over wealthy, powerful people. Probably how she convinced the Schumanns to purchase our beach house in the first place. "And why Hans Schumann died in Belize," Michael added grimly. "He must have threatened to expose her, or refused some demand." "The question is," Diane said, "why create this elaborate scheme to sell us back the house? Why not just disappear with her blackmail material?" As if in answer, the computer screen suddenly changed, a video window opening automatically. Vanessa's face appeared, her familiar calculated smile sending a chill through me. "Hello, Eleanor," she said, as if she could see us through the screen. "If you're watching this, you found my little office. Congratulations. You're smarter than I gave you credit for." It was a pre-recorded message, triggered perhaps by accessing certain files or after a specific time using the computer. "You're probably wondering why I went to all this trouble," she continued. "Why orchestrate the sale of your precious beach house, renovate it, then offer it back to you? The answer is simple. It was never about the house itself. It was about what I could hide inside it." She gestured to indicate the room around her, the same concrete space where we now stood. This server contains material that would destroy dozens of powerful people if released. Tax fraud, bribery, infidelity, medical secrets, all carefully gathered over years. My insurance policy against prosecution or persecution. Her smile widened, taking on a predatory quality. But insurance policies need safe storage. What better place than the home of righteous, respectable Eleanor Lambert, the grieving widow, the devoted mother, the charitable foundation trustee. No one would ever suspect you of housing a blackmail operation. My blood ran cold as her plan became clear. The beach house wasn't just a property she'd coveted. It was intended to become her perfect hiding place, with me as the unwitting custodian. By now, Hans Schumann has met with an unfortunate accident. Vanessa continued, confirming our suspicions. His grieving widow, actually my associate Melissa, not the real Ingrid who died years ago, has generously offered you back your beloved home at a discount. How could you resist? And once you've repurchased it, this server will continue operating quietly behind your wine cellar wall, gathering and distributing sensitive information while I profit from a safe distance. She leaned closer to the camera, her expression hardening. But if you've found this room before completing the purchase, you've disrupted my plan, which activates my contingency. A timer suddenly appeared in the corner of the screen. 10 minutes, counting down. 9 minutes and 59 seconds. 9 minutes and 58. The server has just initiated a shutdown sequence, Vanessa explained calmly. In 10 minutes, 2 things will happen. First, all this lovely blackmail material will be automatically uploaded to several news outlets and law enforcement agencies, along with documentation suggesting it was collected by Eleanor Lambert for purposes of extortion. My heart nearly stopped. She's framing me, I whispered. Second, Vanessa continued, a small incendiary device will activate, destroying the physical server and any evidence that might exonerate you. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to burn the equipment and trigger the sprinkler system, making it appear you try to destroy evidence when exposed. We need to get out of here, Diane said urgently, already moving toward the passage. And call the police. Wait, Michael said, studying the computer. If we leave, Mom takes the fall for Vanessa's blackmail operation. We need to stop this upload and find evidence that Vanessa is behind it. 8 minutes remaining. Can you stop it? I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady. Maybe, Michael muttered, fingers flying over the keyboard. It looks like the upload is happening through a secured connection. If I can disrupt that connection without shutting down the computer. I'll call Bernard, Diane said, pulling out her phone. He needs to get legal representation here immediately. And we need local police, but carefully, they need to understand we're reporting a crime, not committing one. 7 minutes. Michael continued working, his forehead beaded with sweat. The system's fighting me, he reported tersely. Vanessa had professional help setting this up. What about physical evidence? I suggested, scanning the room desperately. Something that proves Vanessa created this, not me. The construction, Diane realized. The wine cellar renovations were done while the Schumanns owned the house. We have permits, contractor records, proof that this room was built after you sold the property. 6 minutes. I began searching the small room frantically, looking for anything Vanessa might have left behind, a fingerprint, a personal item, anything that would connect her to this place. Michael remained focused on the computer, attempting to halt the upload and disarm the incendiary device. I think I've got the upload paused, he announced after another tense minute. But I can't stop the countdown to the incendiary. It must be on a separate system. 5 minutes. We need to find that device, Diane said, already examining the corners of the room with her flashlight. It has to be small, probably hidden in or near the server itself. 4 minutes. Bernard called back, having contacted both legal representation and a police detective he trusted. They were on their way, but wouldn't arrive before the countdown completed. We need to preserve evidence, Bernard instructed over speakerphone. Take photos of everything. Download whatever files you can to an external device. Already trying, Michael confirmed, having connected his phone to the computer. But there's too much data to transfer in the time we have left. 3 minutes. In my increasingly desperate search, I noticed something odd about the desk, a small drawer that seemed shallower than it should be. Pulling it open revealed a false bottom, and beneath that a small leather-bound journal. My hands trembled as I opened it, immediately recognizing Vanessa's handwriting. It was a detailed record of her operation, dates, names, amounts paid for silence, including specific mentions of Hans Schumann's death and the beach house scheme. "I've found something," I called to the others, quickly photographing key pages with my phone. Vanessa's journal. She documented everything. 2 minutes. The incendiary device, Diane reminded us urgently. "We still need to find it." Michael, having done all he could with the computer, joined the search. It would be small, probably attached directly to the server hardware. Look for anything that doesn't belong on a normal computer. 1 minute. There. Diane pointed to a small black box attached to the back of the server tower, nearly invisible against the dark casing. "That's not standard equipment." 30 seconds. Michael examined it without touching. "It's sealed. We can't disarm it safely in the time we have. We need to get out now." We grabbed the journal and Michael's phone with its partial download of evidence, retreating quickly through the narrow passage back into the wine cellar. Just as we cleared the hidden door, a muffled pop came from the secret room, followed by the acrid smell of burning electronics. Seconds later, the property's sprinkler system activated, drenching us as alarms blared throughout the house. We made our way upstairs and outside to the driveway, standing in the sunlight as water streamed from our clothes. "Perfect timing," Diane observed dryly as police sirens became audible in the distance. "Now comes the hard part, explaining all this." The next few hours passed in a blur of police statements, evidence documentation, and legal consultations. Bernard's trust with key officials proved invaluable, as did the physical journal we'd rescued from Vanessa's hidden room. The partial data Michael had managed to download provided additional proof of the extensive blackmail operation. Most crucially, the timing of the wine cellar construction, documented through building permits and contractor statements, confirmed that the hidden server room had been created after I sold the property, eliminating any possibility that I could have been involved in its installation. By evening, the immediate crisis had passed. The police had secured the property as a crime scene, and preliminary investigations supported our account of events. The timer and incendiary device had indeed been designed to destroy evidence, while framing me for both the blackmail operation and attempted destruction of evidence. "Vanessa will be placed on international watch lists," Detective Harris informed us as we concluded our statements at the police station. "The evidence you've provided, especially her journal, gives us clear proof of multiple serious crimes: blackmail, fraud, potential involvement in Hans Schumann's death, which we'll be coordinating with Belizean authorities to investigate as a possible homicide." "Will you be able to find her?" I asked, exhausted but determined. "Eventually," Harris said confidently. "People like Ms. Miller typically make mistakes when their plans unravel. The journal you recovered mentions several aliases and locations. We'll be following up on all of them." As we drove home that evening, physically and emotionally drained, I felt an unexpected sense of closure. The beach house, the property that had been central to Vanessa's schemes from the beginning, was now permanently beyond her reach, transformed from a family haven to a crime scene and back to simply a structure on the coastline, its emotional power over us finally broken. "What happens to the house now?" Michael asked as if reading my thoughts. "It remains in Hans Schumann's estate, I suppose," I replied. "Or rather, in the estate of whoever he actually was. The police will sort that out as part of their investigation." "Do you still want it back?" he asked quietly. "If that somehow became possible after all this?" I considered the question carefully, searching my heart for the answer. "No," I said finally. "That chapter of our lives is complete. The beach house served its purpose for our family, gave us wonderful memories, sheltered us through important years. But holding on to it now, after everything that's happened, would keep us tied to the past, to Vanessa's manipulations." Michael nodded, understanding in his eyes. "The foundation is our legacy now. Exactly, I agreed. Creating something new rather than clinging to something old. 3 months later, justice was taking its course. Vanessa had been located and arrested in Panama, attempting to establish a new identity. The evidence against her was overwhelming, with additional victims coming forward as the extent of her blackmail operation became known. Walter Green had provided key testimony, admitting his unwitting role in introducing her to Hans Schumann and other wealthy targets. The beach house had been sold at auction as part of the complex legal resolution of the fraudulent Schumann estate, purchased by a young family with no connection to its complicated history. I drove past it occasionally, feeling not loss but a gentle nostalgia, appreciation for what it had been in our lives without yearning to reclaim it. Michael and Claire were growing closer, their relationship deepening with the careful deliberation of two people who understood the value of authentic connection. He had moved into his own apartment, but remained active in the foundation, bringing fresh ideas and energy to our expanding programs. The Eleanor and Richard Lambert Foundation had flourished, now funding not only nursing scholarships and cancer research, but also a new initiative, education and support for victims of financial exploitation and elder abuse. Vanessa's schemes, while personally painful, had illuminated vulnerabilities that many others faced, giving us an opportunity to create meaning from the experience. On a warm September evening, almost exactly 1 year after Vanessa had first whispered her plans at Michael's wedding, we gathered for a small celebration at my home. The foundation board, close friends, family. It wasn't a formal occasion, just a moment to acknowledge how far we'd come and where we were heading. As twilight settled over the garden, I found myself standing beside the Japanese maple, its leaves beginning to turn crimson with the approaching autumn. Michael joined me, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. "A toast," he suggested, offering me one. "What shall we drink to?" I asked, accepting the crystal flute. He considered for a moment, then smiled. "To seeing clearly, to recognizing true value, to knowing when to hold on and when to let go." "Perfect," I agreed, touching my glass to his. "And to unexpected strength, found when we need it most." As we sipped our champagne, I glanced around the gathering, at Bernard deep in conversation with Dr. Chen, at Diane laughing with James Washington, at Claire watching Michael with genuine affection in her eyes. This was my true legacy, I realized, not a house of wood and shingles, but these connections, this community of people who had stood with us through crisis and celebration. Vanessa had coveted the beach house as a symbol of wealth and status, never understanding that its true value had always been in the love it contained, not the property itself. In her blind ambition to possess the physical structure, she had ultimately lost everything: freedom, reputation, future. I, on the other hand, had seemingly lost the beach house but preserved everything that mattered: my dignity, my relationships, my purpose. In letting go of what Vanessa had tried to take, I had reclaimed something far more precious: the power to define my own story, to choose my own path forward. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Another day ending, another beginning just hours away. Life continuing, evolving, presenting new challenges and opportunities with each sunrise. I had faced betrayal and attempted manipulation, weathered schemes designed to strip me of home and dignity. But like the Japanese maple beside me, bending with the seasons yet firmly rooted, I had endured, adapted, and ultimately flourished. The beach house was gone, but I remained standing, stronger than before. And that, I realized as I rejoined the celebration, was the greatest victory of all.